Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku became the Halo of Resilience Part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see Part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story, 𝗵𝗃 from Wattpad. So let's start the video. Izuku couldn't believe it. He was trying to wake himself up from the nightmare that he found himself trapped inside of. This had to be a nightmare, right? Because he was given one for all, the second strongest quirk in all of history, and yet he was told he was now expelled from his dream school, that he was expelled from UA. Why, you might ask? Was Izuku Midoriya, the 9th user of one for all, expelled from UA? Well, simply over a pathetic and biased test in Izuku's opinion. Now let's rewind about a year or so. This way you will have more details about everything that has happened. Izuku Midoriya used to be a quirkless boy who had a few encounters with the #1 pro hero, 𝗵𝗃. Now, the first encounter didn't end that great, as 𝗵𝗃 had rejected Izuku's question and told Izuku that he could never become a pro hero and save people as a quirkless person. Then came the second meeting between them, which was during the second attack of the sludge villain. In this event, Izuku had discovered the sludge villain attack where his childhood friend, 𝗵𝗃 𝗵𝗃 was being held by the sludge villain since it had escaped 𝗵𝗃's custody when Izuku had grabbed onto his legs. Izuku, not knowing that 𝗵𝗃 was on site in his skinny form, had heard the heroes talking about waiting for a person with the right quirk, and before he even noticed what he was doing, he had already run past the police line. Izuku, the quirkless child, was running towards the villain when he threw his backpack and landed a hit on the villain's eye that made the villain loosen his grip on 𝗵𝗃, which provided air long enough for 𝗵𝗃 to survive. Of course, 𝗵𝗃, being the person he was, didn't like the fact that the person he saw as a lower individual was helping the almighty 𝗵𝗃. As such, he was complaining and asking what the hell he was doing. Izuku responded he didn't know and that his body moved on its own, but that he looked like he needed help, is what Izuku replied with while maintaining a smile. Unknown to Izuku at the time, this had inspired 𝗵𝗃 to push past his limit and to go in and save both of them. Izuku thought he was going to die, but 𝗵𝗃 arrived in time to block the hit and deliver his own. Izuku was sure he heard 𝗵𝗃 say something about being a hypocrite and not acting on what he was teaching, as he delivered a Texas smash into the villain, which caused the air pressure to change. This change in air pressure caused a sudden downpour of rain, which resulted in the fires around on the buildings that got started by 𝗵𝗃's frantic use of his quirk. Both of them were taken to the side as they were checked out. Izuku, though, was getting scolded for what he did while 𝗵𝗃 was being praised. Izuku wanted to laugh at this situation but didn't. The heroes who were standing around doing nothing were now scolding him, and Izuku found it so ironic. Soon, though, he was let go and warned not to do it again. As Izuku was walking home, 𝗵𝗃 had found him and yelled at him that he didn't need to be saved by a quirkless loser like Deku. Izuku just sighed and looked at his notebook in his hands and placed it in his bag. "I guess it's time to figure out what to do with my life," Izuku muttered as he continued walking down the street, but it seemed fate was going to change for him that day, as this was going to be his second encounter with 𝗵𝗃. "I am her," 𝗵𝗃 was saying as he coughed up blood and dropped to his skinny form. Izuku started to freak out since 𝗵𝗃 was coughing blood, and 𝗵𝗃 waved him to stop. "Hello, young Midoriya, I came here with an apology and an offer," 𝗵𝗃 stated, talking as he asked Izuku what he was thinking when he had run in to save the boy trapped by the sludge villain. Izuku took a second and shrugged. "I wasn't really thinking. When I heard the heroes talk about waiting for the perfect quirk to handle the situation, I found my body already past the police line before my mind realized what was going on. At that point, I had to commit to what I was doing," Izuku stated as he explained what happened. 𝗵𝗃's smile widened at the explanation that Izuku gave him and nodded his head. "Indeed, he is the one I want. It feels as if one for all is pulling towards him as well. When the incident happened, since I knew I was already at my limit, but I somehow gained enough power to push through my limit," 𝗵𝗃 thought as he listened to Izuku's words. Good, that settles on what I want to offer you. Young Midoriya, I wanted to apologize to you. I was cruel in my words when I told you never could be a hero, because at that moment you were. When everyone else stood by doing nothing, you acted. All Might stated, and Izuku said he only made it worse and didn't help. Wrong, it was because of you the quirkless boy had gotten the courage to act that I was inspired to move as well. I was at my limit and I was standing in the crowd. However, due to your actions, I found a new wave of energy to push past my limit and save the day. You Izuku Midoriya are a hero and I believe you can be a pro-hero. All Might stated, and Izuku started to break down into tears. As Izuku was crying, he was then offered what All Might wanted to offer. Young Midoriya, I believe you are the one to inherit my quirk. I want you to inherit my powers. All Might stated, and Izuku froze in confusion and started muttering so many different things out as All Might chopped his head a bit and told him to stop freaking out. My quirk is unknown to everyone and I always play it off with jokes and changing the topic. However, my quirk is actually called One for All. It is the second most powerful quirk in all of history and I deem you worthy of becoming the next user of my quirk as the 9th user. All Might stated as he explained the details of the quirk, though he left out the all for one part to the story. Izuku soon was caught up on what All Might was talking about and accepted the offer without hesitation. This led to the 10 months of hell training where Izuku Midoriya under the supervision of All Might started to clean the entire 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 Municipal Beach Park due to it becoming an illegal dumping ground that the city had failed to clean up. Izuku sadly pushed himself because he wanted to clean the entire beach even outside of the sections that All Might marked out. This resulted in several cases of him collapsing due to exhaustion, which he got an earful for, but Izuku did get the benefits from it as well. During the training, Izuku and All Might also have become much more closers to the point that neither was admitting it, but they both saw each other as father and son. Again, neither side was willing to admit it since they were both awkward creatures of social interactions, but nevertheless they did find a good balance between the two of them. Throughout the training, All Might would take Izuku out to get ice cream every so often and was starting to learn more of Izuku's life, and he had concerns as well about it but kept them to himself since Izuku was still opening up to him more and more. Now, back to the training itself. Izuku had completed the 10 months of hell and was able to receive One for All. Though, there was a problem. Izuku received the quirk only hours before the actual exam for UA. As such, he had zero time to actually training with the quirk and would be using it during the exam itself with no real guidance except to clench your butt cheeks and yell smash. This led to the events that he was now dealing with, as during the exam he used One for All and blew up the 0-pointers. This act gave him enough rescue points to get entry into the hero course, but it also meant he caught the eye of his future homeroom teacher 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃, who was known as the Eraserhead hero. This teacher sadly had a large rate of expulsion, and Izuku's act of destroying himself to save the girl did not please him, and 𝗧𝗃𝗃𝗧𝗃 didn't want Izuku Midoriya in the hero course. Now, we come to the recent day, the first day of the hero course. Everyone was told to put gym uniforms on and to go out to the training field where they started to do a quirk apprehension test. In this test, they were threatened with expulsion if they came in the last place, and Izuku would admit he was scared of failing due to having zero time to train with his quirk. He didn't risk training with it during the 2 months between the exam and the first day due to All Might being out of contact and busy with preparing to teach at UA. As such, Izuku was going to try and learn to control it in a controlled environment where he didn't risk killing someone with a punch he did on the robot in the entrance exam, but that decision came to bite him today. Eraserhead made the threat to expel the last person since someone said the test was going to be fun since they could use their quirks. Eraserhead even gave a speech about heroes were meant to correct the unfairness of the world. However, Izuku found the test itself biased, but there wasn't anything he could do about it. Izuku though thought his luck was up when Eraserhead stopped Bakugo from attacking him, even though Eraserhead told Izuku that he could never be a hero. However, it seemed going from a full limb to just a finger wasn't enough for Eraserhead, as Izuku came in the last place. 16 As Izuku stood there, he heard the sentence that destroyed him. Izuku Midoriya, you are hereby expelled from UA. You can go to the principal's office and the principal will have everything you will need to leave the school. Everyone else needs to go and get changed and go to the classroom to get your schedule. Aizawa-sensei stated as he walked away from the training field. Unknown to Izuku, All Might was standing behind one of the walls and was impressed with Izuku's ability to go from limbs to a finger and thought he was cool and amazing for figuring that out to get the most out of his quirk with limiting the damage, but even he was in shock. He knew of Eraserhead's expulsion rate and that is why he came outside to watch them. However, he wasn't prepared himself to watch his protege get expelled because of a 𝗵𝗵𝗃 quirk apprehension test. All Might was honestly confused on how Aizawa could be so cruel to expel Izuku when he's only had the quirk for a few months. Aizawa should know of the truth when the student files had the recent update for his quirk registration in them. As such, Aizawa couldn't claim that he didn't know that Izuku Midoriya only had it for less than 2 months. However, unknown to All Might was the fact that Aizawa never looks at the student profiles until later on, since he doesn't want to judge the students based on the previous teacher's notes and adapt a mindset to the students without seeing them first. As such, due to things unknown by several parties, the situation wasn't rectified like it could have been and a new path was set before Izuku. Aizawa walked by All Might and asked why he was outside wasting his time spying on a class. All Might wasn't in the mood to talk to Aizawa at all though and gave a general response of he wanted to see his future students. Though All Might did ask why the green-haired student got expelled. All Might got at the answer but didn't let it show. He isn't fit to be a hero and never will be. He's not more than an arrogant child with a powerful quirk. It's better to kill their dreams now instead of letting them go and them failing later on. Aizawa stated as he walked away, and he didn't see All Might tense his hands at that answer. After Aizawa was gone, All Might went to his protege and totally not his son. Young Izuku, All Might called out as he stopped near Izuku. Izuku looked up at All Might and the hero felt a shiver go down his back at the dead look Izuku had in his eyes. I'm sorry All Might, I truly wasn't meant to be a hero, it seems. You should never have given me the quirk since I can't get it under control, even though I should have tried to during the past 2 months. I thought it would have been better to do it in a controlled environment instead of risking my and everyone else's lives with how powerful it is now. I am just a disappointment to the legacy, Izuku stated as tears rolled down his face. All Might gripped his hands because he was that his protege was reduced to this because of a stupid test that he shouldn't have gotten expelled on. Especially since another student attempted to assault him, yet that student is still in the said class. Izuku was sitting there on the ground as All Might came up to him. Izuku was trapped in his thoughts of how much a failure he was and was only knocked out of it when All Might spoke several times as he called Izuku. Izuku looked up to All Might and spoke of how he was a disgrace to the legacy and that he should never have gotten the quirk. As Izuku sat there in his disappointment, he reached up and took a hairpiece and offered it to All Might, whose eyes widened. Yet, the hero never reached for it. Why won't you take it? I just got expelled from the best hero school in the country. Doesn't that say enough of how pathetic and a disgrace I am to the legacy? Izuku asked with tears rolling down his face as he looked up to All Might, whose eyes only had sorrow in them. No, Izuku, it doesn't. It only speaks to how lazy of a teacher Aizawa is because he knew you only had it for a few months. It's a part of your student file when you updated your quirk registration from quirkless to the superpower quirk. As such, he knew you had 0 training in it and would have had a good idea the exam was the first time you used it. This test says nothing about you. If anything, it only says amazing things since you went from a full limb to only a finger in damage. That is amazing, with this only being the second attempt on using one for all. All Might stated as Izuku broke into tears and hugged All Might. All Might hugged him back and rubbed his back as they sat there for a few minutes. Soon All Might pulled away and looked at Izuku. Young Izuku, I can easily talk to the principal and have the expulsion lifted most likely. So let me go do that since you shouldn't be expelled. All Might said as he was about to go do it. However, as he was going to do it, he got stopped by Izuku. No, I don't want you to do that. Izuku stated, and All Might was confused on why Izuku didn't want him to do it. Young Izuku, if this is about you feeling like you shouldn't be a hero, then throw the thoughts out of your mind. You deserve to be a hero more than anyone with the life you went through and yet can still smile and longing to help people. All Might stated, and Izuku nodded his head but spoke. The next statement that he heard shocked All Might but also made him proud of the young man before him. I know that I just don't want to go to UA anymore because you had Eraserhead's decision overruled. First, that would cause issues between me and my classmates because they would think I somehow pulled strings, which would be true. 2. I don't think I can honestly deal with Eraserhead anytime soon due to his bias test, and honestly, I think he purposely moves the ranks around. Izuku stated, and All Might was confused and asked for more details, which Izuku gave. Izuku explained how overall he was far fitter than 𝗵𝗃𝗃 and that all of his test scores from what he remembered were higher than 𝗵𝗃𝗃's except the side-to-side test. Overall, it doesn't make sense for me to have actually placed last if the final results were averaged together. Even if they weren't, 𝗵𝗃𝗃's sole high score above mine shouldn't place him above me in ranks. I'm not trying to be petty and say he should be expelled over me, it's just how the math works don't make sense unless Eraserhead was using some different ranking system than he explained to us. Izuku stated, and All Might realized Izuku was right, there was indeed no way for 𝗵𝗃𝗃 to have placed higher than Izuku. 𝗵𝗃𝗃's quirk only helped him on the side-to-side and Izuku outdid 𝗵𝗃𝗃 in everything else by larger margins. Izuku then went on to explain that he believes the test was actually about what potential that Eraserhead saw in the individual people for the final results as a way for him to get rid of anyone he didn't want in the class. Izuku said that he was sure Eraserhead had actual scores for all of their tests, but that the first day test was more for Eraserhead's usage of finding who had potential in what, and Izuku was deemed pointless since Izuku knew that Eraserhead had expelled an entire class before even though they had flashy quirks. If you aren't going to UA, then where do you want to go? All Might asked Izuku, and he was silent for a bit. There is the best school in the West, Shiketsu High School, but it would cost too much for my mother to send me there since it's so far and it's not practical for me to do trips back and forth every day. Otherwise I need to go to almost a no-name school nearby. There's also the issue of you and me not being near each other, so I can receive training under you to learn how to control the quirk. Izuku stated, and All Might nodded his head and was thinking. As he thought, he came to a decision. Izuku, I've got a plan. Let's go withdraw you from the school, or rather have Nezu change the expulsion paperwork to a withdrawal instead. I will call in some favors and have you admitted into Shiketsu. I also will ask someone to train you over there who can help you get control of the quirk faster than I likely can. He's the person that trained me when my 𝗵𝗃𝗃 died. All Might stated, and Izuku nodded his head but said it still wouldn't be practical due to cost and time to go to that school. All Might waved his hand and said he would handle it and that Izuku and his mother need not worry about it. Izuku wanted to protest, but All Might wouldn't let it go. Soon, both of them arrived in Nezu's office and were welcomed in. Izuku, this is, All Might started but got cut off. Am I a dog? A mouse? A bear? Who knows, but I am the principal of UA Nezu. Nezu stated, and Izuku stated what he thought Nezu was. I think you are a genetically modified white stoat that would inhabit areas generally with heavy snow, Izuku stated as both Nezu and All Might looked at him. All Might was confused but was shocked at the guess and realized it just might be right since Nezu fit the picture quite well while Nezu was grinning widely at the guess. I don't know for sure, not even I know, but I think that is the best guess we have in all honesty. Now, why do I have both users of one for all in my office on the first day? Are you here to request access to some gym for him to train in? All Might? Nezu asked as he went to his desk. Please keep this meeting short since I know I need to deal with some student that got expelled out of Eraserhead's class. My money is on the 𝗵𝗃𝗃 boy. Nezu said as he hadn't looked at the information in the expulsion that Eraserhead had submitted and only knew that someone got expelled. Then he noticed both of the users of the one for all tense. I assume you didn't tell him I knew of the quirk. Did you tell him about the others that know? Nezu asked, and All Might coughed as both Izuku and he sat down. Thanks for reminding me about that, but that isn't why we are here. That expelled student is actually young Izuku's here. Aizawa expelled him. All Might stated, and Nezu froze. He looked at the request from Aizawa and cursed as the man had just expelled the future symbol of peace. Nezu wanted the 9th user of one for all protected inside of his school since it would be a good place for the boy to train at. Well, I will need to come up with some excuse on why I am rejecting the expulsion, but no matter, we can undo this. Nezu said as he was about to reject the notice, but Izuku stopped him. Sir, I actually am not going to seek to continue my enrollment here. I've decided to go to another school. Though, It would be helpful if you would be willing to change it from expulsion to me withdrawing, since it would make it easier on All Might to get me into Shiketsu when he asks them to enroll me there. Izuku stated, and Nezu was in shock that he was now losing the 9th user of One for All to another school. He also wondered why Izuku Midoriya didn't want to keep going at the school and asked why he didn't want to keep going, and Izuku explained his reasons. Nezu nodded his head. Damn it, Izawa, you just screwed the school out of future fundraising, since we won't have All Might's protege and the future number 1 pro hero here as an alumni. Nezu thought. Nezu couldn't push full blame on Eraserhead either, since he's allowed the expulsions of his always and allowed him to conduct that test as he saw fit, even though it was kind of bias. I will agree to change it to a withdrawal, but you will need your mother's signature though on the paperwork. I can give you the paperwork for her to sign, and you can have All Might deliver it back since he still works here. Nezu state, and All Might spoke up at that moment. About that, All Might said, and Nezu and Izuku's eyes widened a bit. Izuku though stepped in. All Might, you are not quitting just because I got expelled and will be going to a different school. The rumors are already out and about, and if you quit it would damage UA's reputation, which would weaken the hero's reputation. It would be one thing if you spent a year here and then retired and then worked at another school, since you could say you are going between different high-tier schools to deliver advice to as many students as possible, but if you left now it would be a scandal. Izuku stated, and All Might was shocked that Izuku was still wanting him to work at UA. Nezu was impressed with Izuku's thinking but also thankful, since he was right and it would hit UA's reputation if All Might suddenly quit. Also, it would expose our connection easily if you suddenly appeared at my new school, since someone would be smart enough to connect the dots. Also, you need the school to hide yourself during your off hours. You also need to save your time limit until I can take over your position, Dad. Izuku stated, not realizing he said Dad, and Nezu chuckled as Izuku started to realize what he said. All Might just laughed and patted Izuku on the back and said it was fine. It's okay, Izuku, I've come to see you as a son as well. All Might stated, and Izuku nodded his head but was still embarrassed. As the conversation moved forward, Izuku decided to ask Nezu to sign his hero notebook, since this would be the only chance he would have. Sir, could I get you to sign my notebook, since this is likely the only chance for a long time to meet you? Izuku asked, and Nezu nodded his head. As he was working on the paperwork, Izuku pulled his hero notebook out of his backpack and flipped to the page Nezu was on and handed it over. Nezu stopped working on the paperwork for a moment and looked at the book to sign it. As he was signing it, he noticed what it was and his eyes widened. Damn it, Izawa. You just kicked out a skilled analysis. Nezu thought as he started to flip through the pages and could see the level of details in it. Nezu even saw recent pages for some of Izuku's now former classmates and how they were almost completed. Dear God, he's had limited contact with these people and he has already gained this much information. Nezu thought was snapped out of his thoughts by All Might asking if he was alright. Yes, I am alright. I've just gotten attached to reading these notes since they are on a professional level. They are nearing mine as well. I have to admit I hate the fact that UA is losing a student of Izuku's caliber. Izuku, I also suggest you apply this type of thinking to One for All, since I know you don't have control yet. It might help give you ideas on controlling it. Nezu stated, and Izuku was shocked at the praise that he received, since everyone has told him that his notes were always horrible. Thank you, sir. All my past teachers always told me my notes were horrible and I should stop. Though, I think all of that was due to me being quirkless. Izuku stated, and Nezu made a mental note to look into Izuku's past schools. Soon they were finished and it was time for Izuku and All Might to leave as they needed to talk to Izuku's mother. Nezu waved them off and decided he was going to have a conversation with the homeroom teacher Izawa soon, since he had just costed the school a bright student that would have done wonders for the school. Now though, Shiketsu was going to gain the future number 1 hero instead of them, and that thought of the competing school getting Izuku Midoriya, the 9th user of One for All, Nezu off. All Might had gathered all of the paperwork from Nezu and both he and Izuku left Nezu's office. Both of them avoided being seen by other people and were able to make it out of UA and got into All Might's truck that he owned. It was the same truck that he used to transport the trash from the beach to the dump, which Izuku noticed and chuckled at. All Might as well laughed a bit at the fact that it brought back memories of their hell training that they put Izuku through. Soon though they started to get silent as they drove towards the Midoriya home. All Might, are you sure you are okay with taking care of the costs for me to go to Shiketsu? This is a bit selfish of me since I could have stayed at UA. Izuku stated as they drove down the road. All Might nodded his head easily without even thinking about it. I am perfectly okay with paying for it. Do remember, I am the #1 pro hero. Even if I retired today, I could easily afford a lot of things due to all of the merchandise I sell of my image and other things my image is used for. A good chunk of money goes to charities, but even then I still have a lot of money even though I don't show it. I tend to buy things for convenience sake unless it's my private jet, since I need to hide my form when flying from other people. I also own a decent size home, but not a mansion like others think. I get things that meet my needs and then add a few levels of comfort for myself. All Might stated, and Izuku nodded his head as he relaxed in the car. All Might soon turned on the radio and they just listened to it on the drive over to the house. As they arrived at the home, Izuku realized that they never talked about how they were going to introduce All Might to his mother. All Might, we've never talked about how we are going to introduce you. My mother would get really suspicious of you trying to pay for my schooling even if you claim to be my mentor without revealing yourself as All Might. Izuku stated, and All Might nodded his head. I know. I will handle it, and let me lead the conversation about everything, okay? All Might asked, and Izuku nodded his head. Soon they both got out of the car and walked up to the apartment complex where Izuku opened the door. Mom, are you home? Izuku called out, and 𝗵𝗃 said she was in the kitchen. Mom, I have someone here that wants to meet and talk to you. It's important. Izuku stated as he moved towards the living room and kitchen area. All Might put the guest slippers on and follow behind him. As they entered the room, 𝗵𝗃 told Izuku that he should have texted her that they were going to have a guest. All Might apologized. Sorry, Mrs. Midoriya, I apologize since this was an unforeseen situation that Izuku and I have found ourselves in, and we needed to talk to you as quickly as possible. All Might stated. 𝗵𝗃 looked at him and introduced herself as Izuku Midoriya, and All Might introduced himself as Toshinori Yagi. Soon they all sat down on the couch and All Might placed the folder down on the table. The first thing, ma'am, let me apologize for not meeting you sooner, as I've been close to your son for about a year now, as I have been training him for the UA entrance exams. I should have come to see you much sooner than now, but have been caught up in many things, but that is no excuse for not making time to see you before something happened. All Might stated as he bowed his head in apology. 𝗵𝗃 waved him off and asked him to stop bowing. I indeed would have liked to meet you far sooner than now, but it's quite fine since Izuku has been looking much happier since he's been training with you. Though, I'm worried about what you mean about something happening. 𝗵𝗃 asked as she saw Izuku's finger in a splint and wondered if it was about that. All Might looked at Izuku and nodded his head as he transformed into his buff form, which 𝗵𝗃's eyes widened at. Even Izuku was shocked that he revealed his form so easily. I am here. All Might said before dropping his form and coughing a bit. 𝗵𝗃 freaked out as he coughed up some blood, but also that fact that she just saw him transform into All Might. Then she heard her son talk. All Might, you really got to stop pushing yourself, Izuku said as he handed All Might a tissue to wipe the blood away. Thank you, my boy. I really keep forgetting to carry something to wipe the blood all of the time, All Might said as he wiped the blood up and threw it away. Both of them turned to 𝗵𝗃, who was just staring at them, and Izuku blushed from embarrassment. Mom, this is All Might, my trainer. He has a lot to talk to you about, and I'm sorry in advance. Izuku said as he rubbed his neck, and All Might rolled his eyes. 𝗵𝗃 then looked at All Might in confusion but was grasping the situation. First, before I keep going, are you completely with us since I need your full attention on the topics we will talk about? All Might asked, and she nodded her head. All Might sighed and decided to talk about one for all first. Might as well hit that first so she understands how invested I am into Izuku and how close me and him have gotten due to everything before hitting the expulsion. All Might thought as he looked at her. I'm going to tell you about my quirk, or rather your son's quirk as well. First, your son's quirk isn't called superpower. That's the lie we came up with so people wouldn't know the truth. Your son's quirk and mine are both called one for all, and it's a quirk that can be passed between users. I gave your son his current quirk since I choose him to inherit my position as the symbol of peace. All Might stated, and 𝗵𝗃𝗁's eyes widened in disbelief at what she was hearing. All Might then explained how the quirk passed between users and that Izuku Midoriya was now the 9th user. He then let her ask questions. First, I am still having trouble grasping it, but I doubt you are lying. I was always wondering how Izuku ended up with a quirk that didn't appear like mine or his father's. You say it's been passed down for generations. Why was it passed down? Surely a quirk like yours has a goal to accomplish. 𝗵𝗃𝗁 asked, and All Might chuckled a bit. I see where you get your abilities to analyze, my boy. Though, I am surprised you never asked for the details on that. All Might said while looking at Izuku, who was in shock at the question his mother asked. He then turned to 𝗵𝗃𝗁 and nodded his head. Indeed, there is, or rather was, a goal to accomplish, but I completed it. Let me tell you both the entire story of One for All. All Might stated as he started to explain the entire story as he knew it of All for One and One for All. At the end of it, Izuku was freaking out about fighting a 200-year-old monster, and 𝗵𝗃𝗁 was glaring at him. Now please calm down. The man is dead since I caved his skull in. Humans can't live with having their brains smashed. All Might stated, and both of them calmed down. All for One is how I ended up with the loss of my organs and scar. It's why I only have a 3-hour limit now, but unless he's 100% immortal, then I don't see how he would have survived getting his head crushed in, since if he was immortal then he would have hunted me down when I was younger and wouldn't care about getting injured. All Might said without knowing. He raised the bad omen flag on their futures in regards to All for One. Both of the Midoriyas were calmed down and nodded their heads in understanding. As such, you can see why your son and I have grown close. I will also admit that I have come to know your son as my own child, which I am finding is typical of the users since I saw my own 𝗵𝗃𝗁 as my mother. All Might stated, and 𝗵𝗃𝗁 nodded her head and watched her son try to hide his head in his arms as he was embarrassed from the conversation. Well, I am glad Izuku has a male role model in his life that he trusts and looks up to, since Hisashi has always been gone to America. The last time Hisashi tried to apply to return to Japan, they threatened to hold him in breach of his contract, which he stupidly signed all those years ago. It was more or less a SLV contract in my views, but we needed the money back then, and it didn't seem as bad until Izuku was born, and they started to get a bit more aggressive after the first year of Izuku being around. Soon after that, they pushed him to America. It's never been the same for Izuku since he left for work, and he hardly calls nowadays anyway since the time zone differences. I do talk to him here and there, but nothing like we used to. We've actually divorced a few years ago since he didn't want us to keep living in the limbo of our marriage. He, however, still sends enough money for me not to work as well, but I still work some since I want to have enough saved up in the event he ever stops. So, I am glad you two are close. 𝗵𝗃𝗁 said, and Izuku was shocked to learn his parents had divorced. Even All Might was shocked since Izuku looked shocked at the new information, which means he didn't know. At least, I'm not pushing anyone boundaries and stepping on toes by becoming a father figure to Izuku, thought All Might. Now that we have all of that out of the way, we need to move to the issue that brought all of this to light. Sadly, Izuku was expelled today from UA. All Might said bluntly, and 𝗵𝗃𝗁 choked on her tea as Izuku patted her back and gave All Might a "Are you serious?" look, which was funny. Izuku, what did you do? 𝗵𝗃𝗁 yelled out, and Izuku backed up quickly and lowered his head as he gripped his hands. Now Ms. Midoriya, he didn't do anything that deserved the expulsion. Izuku just got unlucky that he landed with the harshest teacher that has a high expulsion rate. As you know, Izuku only received the quirk the day of the exam since it took so long to build his body up due to the power. Even then Izuku suffered the breaking of his arm and legs due to the power output. This put him on the radar of the one homeroom teacher who didn't believe Izuku should be in the school since he lacked control of his quirk. All Might stated, and was stopped right where he was talking by 𝗵𝗃𝗁. First, let's hit on the fact that UA never informed me of him breaking his legs or arm. I believe even as an entrance exam that they had to legally tell me that. 𝗵𝗃𝗁 asked, and All Might looked at Izuku and then back at 𝗵𝗃𝗁. You didn't know? he asked as he was still brushing up on the rules of UA, and she shook her head. Izuku then spoke up as well. I didn't tell her since I didn't want her to worry, but I kind of assumed UA would have told her. It's one thing that I broke my finger in the test today using the quirk and got it healed most of the way by Recovery Girl before we left, but 2 legs and an arm should qualify as a call to my mom, shouldn't it? Izuku asked, 𝗲𝗵𝗃, who shrugged. Remind you, I just started and I'm still learning all of the rules, but I would have assumed that stuff got reported. I will look into it when I go back to UA since that seems odd. 𝗲𝗵𝗃 stated, and 𝗵𝗃 nodded her head, trusting 𝗲𝗵𝗃. Okay, now let's talk about the quirk breaking my son's body. 𝗵𝗃 asked, and 𝗲𝗵𝗃 said they would hit on that topic soon as he would suggest how they would be solving it, which she nodded her head at. 𝗲𝗵𝗃 started where he left off at. From what I understand, 𝗳𝗏 aka Eraserhead believes Izuku is an arrogant child that never trained his quirk, which didn't make sense to me since Izuku files would say that he's only had it for 2 months. However, 𝗳𝗏 expelled Izuku since he came last in the quirk apprehension test. I was willing to try and get the principal who knows of one for all to override the expulsion, but Izuku has refused that. Even the principal said when he learned of it he would make an excuse up to override it, but Izuku still refuses. As such, the expulsion was changed to a withdrawal request, which we need your signature for. Izuku has decided, which I support, to go to Shiketsu High School in the west of Japan instead of having the expulsion overridden. 𝗲𝗵𝗃 said, and 𝗵𝗃 looked at Izuku, who nodded his head. 𝗵𝗃 though had concerns which she voiced. Sweetie, outside of the cost of going to that school so far away, your travel time would be so big that you would hardly have free time any days, 𝗵𝗃 stated, and Izuku then looked at 𝗲𝗵𝗃, which 𝗵𝗃 did as well. Indeed, but in regards to the costs, I will be covering them, and before you argue, it's not negotiable. Izuku, outside of being the 9th user and future symbol for Japan, is a son to me as well. I have far enough money that this would be pocket change to me. 𝗲𝗵𝗃 stated, and 𝗵𝗃 looked like she wanted to object to him paying for it, but he wouldn't allow it. Even if he seemed rude, he wasn't going to allow her to pay for it since he wanted to do it. Now, in regards to travel time, there wouldn't be any due to Shiketsu having dorms that they like students to live in. 𝗲𝗵𝗃 stated, and Izuku's eyes widen a bit at not knowing about the dorms. 𝗵𝗃 looked at Izuku and then at 𝗲𝗵𝗃. That sounds good enough for those, and I am sad I won't see my son as much, but at least I know he will be safe on the campus with 𝗵. Assuming staff looking over them. 𝗵𝗃 asked, and 𝗲𝗵𝗃 nodded his head. Indeed, they have the homeroom teachers living on the top floor of the dorms for their classes. Students aren't required at the time to live on campus, but it's highly encouraged to cut down on travel time. It also allows them to use the gyms and equipment to train more often since they don't need to travel far for it. There are curfews, and if the student will be off campus on an off day or a school day without returning before curfew, then they require the student to notify them so they can keep track of where the student may be at. 𝗲𝗵𝗃 stated, which 𝗵𝗃 nodded her head at in understanding and was glad they had such rules in place to keep track of the children they are caring for. 𝗲𝗵𝗃 then explained that the costs are a bit higher due to the dorms and the school covering all food outside of anything extra that the student might buy off campus, since their IDs give them access to drink machines and other things on campus. Soon they were on the topic of how Izuku was going to get accepted into the school. As they were talking about the new school Izuku would be going for, 𝗵𝗃 wondered how he would get in since the entrance exam has already passed and the first week of school starts the following week, since they were 1 week behind UA for the most part. 𝗲𝗵𝗃 nodded his head at the question and explained the hows. I am going to call the principal of the school and pull strings. I will also bring the principal into the knowledge circle of one for all as well, so Izuku has someone in authority at the school in the knowledge of the quirk so he can get help from school staff. I will ask them to place him into their 1A class, and since school hasn't started there yet, the students won't know that Izuku had strings pulled for him to get into the school. I'm sure some story will be provided to the staff which I will help with to ensure he isn't discriminated against due to being placed in without the exam. 𝗲𝗵𝗃 stated, and 𝗵𝗃 was glad he was going so far for her son and covering all of the bases of the possible situations of what could happen. As they were talking, they then moved on to the topic of how they would get Izuku's quirk under control. Now Izuku, I want you to do what Principal Nezu suggested and apply your quirk analysis towards one for all. Though hide the information the best you can or use different words when referring to the quirk and not call it one for all since we don't need someone finding it out due to you writing it down. All Might said, and Izuku nodded his head, and All Might started to talk again about the plans. Outside of that, before my 𝗵𝗃𝗲 died, to all for one, she introduced me to a friend of hers that trained me after her death. He became my mentor and I learned how to control one for all for myself. My problems didn't lay in too much power and need to scale back, rather than I needed to learn how to fight with it since I was able to use all 100%, but I received it at a much weaker point. I seem to have grown it stronger than I realized as well. All Might stated, and Izuku rubbed his arm remembering the feeling of it breaking, and All Might shuddered at the memory of seeing Izuku fall from so high. As such, I will call him and ask him to come out of retirement and set up a way for him to work at Shiketsu so he can train Izuku personally, since I can't be with Izuku like I plan to at UA. Izuku won't let me quit since it would cause issues in the public if they were to learn of me quitting so soon, and I can't go work at Shiketsu since it would make it easier to connect Izuku to me and the truth of the quirk. All Might stated, and Inko nodded her head and asked who the man was that was going to be training Izuku. Both Midoriyas watched as All Might shuddered before he spoke. I am so sorry that I will be condemning you, Izuku. My mentor's name is 𝗵𝗃𝗲. Izuku, if you thought the 10 months of training cleaning the beach was hell, well, I am sorry to say it will seem like a cakewalk to what he will do to you. I am deathly afraid of that man, but we got no other choice since I don't want you breaking your bones since it would lead to permanent damage, which we can't have. All Might stated, and Inko agreed but asked what the man might do. All Might shuddered as he remembered his training, and Izuku got worried a bit. The man is ruthless in his training. He's an old-style trainer that will throw Izuku into the deep end and kick his butt while Izuku trains to ensure Izuku is ready for any villains. I hated the training, but I must admit it made me really prepared for a lot of the people I went on to face since they were all easier to deal with than the 𝗵𝗃𝗲. He won't let Izuku die if you are wondering, but Izuku will be pushed to his limits and then past them if 𝗵𝗃𝗲 does as he pleases, which he will since no one can stop that old man. He's really old and short now but can still beat me, All Might said, and Izuku wanted to meet the man but was afraid as well. Inko was kind of happy that Izuku would be prepared to deal with people that he fights in the future but wish it didn't involve so much pain. After Inko signed the paperwork, All Might said he would start making the phone calls at once and asked if he could have some tea while he works on the calls. Inko nodded her head and went and got some fresh tea as All Might pulled his phone out and started to make his calls. Izuku though went and started notes on One for All and attempted to learn how to control it via applying his quirk analysis to the quirk itself like any other quirk he does. As Izuku sat there, he wrote out what he knew about the quirk. Basic information: superpower stockpiles energy in some form that is unknown to the user. What this energy is unknown but does put off some electrical output when it's powered on and provides a boost to the individual's body in speed and strength. As it stands, the quirk is too powerful and breaks the user whenever it is used due to the user's inexperience in using a quirk due to being quirkless for a decade beforehand. The theory is that the user needed to build up their body before the body could even withstand the activation of the said quirk. Strengths: provides an overall increase in strength and speed. Provides durability to the user to withstand hitting things. At certain power output, the user is able to create air blasts due to the force being procured. Weakness: too much power will lead to the user's body being injured. Due to all of the power, the user needs to learn strong control in regards to the output. As Izuku sat there, he honestly didn't know what to think outside of what he had. Overall, the quirk was straightforward, but he was having issues controlling the quirk due to the raw power that he had behind him that he was breaking himself whenever he turned it on and used it. Izuku decided to walk back into the living room since he was in his room for about 30 minutes and see what All Might was doing. As he entered, he heard the tail end of one conversation but didn't get many details out of it. Izuku sat down on the couch and looked at his notebooks as All Might said thank you to whoever he was talking to. All Might looked at Izuku and then Inko. So, I got 𝗵𝗃𝗲𝗺 to agree to work at Shiketsu and train Izuku. Now I just need to get the school to accept Izuku and hire 𝗵𝗃𝗻𝗄. Honestly, I would pay for the old man's salary myself if need be to ensure he's there to train Izuku. Also, 𝗵𝗃𝗻𝗄 is coming over here to your house. He will arrive tomorrow morning and will be taking Izuku out to train since he wants to see if he can get Izuku some form of control before entering the school. So for the rest of this week until Monday, you will be training with Gran Torino non-stop Izuku. All Might stated, and Izuku nodded his head and was happy at the prospect of getting some form of control before he started at the other school. All Might then started the phone call with Shiketsu High School. After the phone ranged for a bit, the other side answered. Izuku could hear the conversation quite clearly since All Might had put it on speaker and warned the Midoriyas about doing so. As such, they stayed silent as All Might talked. "Hello, this is Shiketsu High School. How may I direct your call?" asked the person on the phone. "Hello ma'am. This is All Might calling and I need to speak to the principal about some matters. Is he available right now? It is an urgent and personal matter for me." All Might asked, and the individual on the other side of the line seemed caught off guard. "Let me check, one moment," she said, and after a few minutes the call was transferred and a new voice came across the line. "This is Principal So speaking," stated the voice, and Izuku recognized the name as Mikoto So, otherwise known as the Red King, whose quirk was called Red Aura. It granted the user the ability over the fire aspect and allowed for heavy offensive potential. It's theorized that the Red King could easily take Endeavor on, but he is also known for being a slacker and never aimed to take any high ranks in the hero ranking and has stayed at a low rank since he took over the school, even though they have some traditions that tie back to the military since it was founded as a military school before being converted. Well, that was an insightful look into my life and the school that I didn't know I was going to get, stated the voice, and Izuku blushed strong since he muttered all of that. All Might broke into laughter as even Inko joined in. "Sorry about that, Principal So, he has a habit of doing that, which I'm trying to figure out how to help him on the muttering or limit who can hear it. Anyway, I am calling about my protege who you just heard talk," All Might stated, and the line was silent for a bit. "You have a protege? This is the first I am hear about it. I would think that would have been big news," the principal stated, and All Might agreed with him. "Not many people know of him currently as I've kept it under warps. However, we've run into a problem that I need your school's help with," All Might stated, and the principal asked for details. "You see, my protege quirk only came in about 2 months ago, so he doesn't have any control of it, but he still managed to pass the UA entrance exam. However, my protege ended up in 1A with the teacher being Eraserhead, who has a high expulsion rate. Eraserhead did his quirk apprehension test and Izuku ended up in the last place, which is beside me, even though I doubt he was the worst scorer overall. However, moving past that, Principal Nezu was willing to block the expulsion and keep my protege Izuku Midoriya in the school, but Izuku doesn't want me having the principal doing that. As such, instead of expulsion, it's been changed to a withdraw. We are currently searching for a new school for him to go to, which right now would be Shiketsu High School, if you are willing to accept him into your hero course. I do have someone to train him and get the quirk under control, which would need to be hired on since I have to work at UA and I can't quit without causing a scandal. Is there any way you can help us?" All Might asked, and the line was silent for a while. As they waited on the edge of their seats, the principal spoke up. "I can make it work. We actually have an open seat in 1A right now since someone dropped out due to moving out of the country. We would need to come up with some sort of story if you don't want the fact that he's your protege to get out to the staff, unless you're okay with them knowing," the principal asked, and All Might thought it over. "Who all knows about those that passed the exam? Can we limit it to you, the homeroom teacher, and our side that knows that he didn't go through the exam?" All Might asked, and the principal was quiet for a bit. "I would need to expand it to the 1B homeroom teacher as well, since they were there when we picked out the students for the classes. The other staff knows who passed, but I can easily pass the story of him coming from another school, which is true. The students have zero ideas on who passed until they meet them in the class," stated the principal, and All Might agreed with it. Then the topic of one for all needed to be talked about. "So how secure is this line?" All Might asked, and the principal said it was the securest he had. All Might took a second and decided on what he wanted to say. "There are more details I want to give you in private and not over the phone. I don't want to risk it, but it's going to be a large story and information that you need to know. It's also the reason I need you to hire a new teacher that will focus on training Izuku and his quirk. The name of the person I need you to hire to help train Izuku is 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏. He is my mentor who trained me, which he could help others as well, but his main focus privately would be Izuku's training and access to any of your training equipment that 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏 asks for to do the training. I will pay for anything that the school can't easily acquire that they need as well, and I will also be increasing my donations to the school since he will be going there. All Might stated, and the principal thanked him for the money and said he would have the man hired, but he would need a lot of paperwork signed quickly to get it done in time. All Might asked him to send to his laptop the paperwork for 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏 and Izuku Midoriya's enrollment. All Might said he would come to the school tomorrow early in the morning to talk about the private details since he had a class to teach that afternoon. Soon the conversation came to an end and Izuku was set up. He would be now attending Shiketsu High School starting next week once the paperwork was filled out. All Might stayed at the house and joined them for dinner as he printed the paperwork off on their computer and Inko, and he worked through it to get Izuku's stuff done since All Might would go down there early in the morning. All Might also forwarded the paperwork to 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏 so he could start on it. All Might had left to go to his own home that night after they finished the paperwork about Izuku. Inko had also signed the paperwork that gave All Might legal permissions with the school and anything regarding Izuku if she wasn't nearby at the time to make the decisions or couldn't be contacted. All Might wanted to stay a bit longer, but he also knew he had to go early on the train to Shiketsu High School to talk about the quirk so the principal would have the knowledge in the event something happened. This way, in the event 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏 wasn't on hand, the principal would know how to deal with a situation if it involved one for all and Izuku's former quirkless status. The next day quickly arrived and Izuku had just worn his workout clothing and made sure to eat enough to stop his hunger but not to fill himself up too much that he would throw up. Izuku had quickly learned from the 10 months of training under All Might that it was a horrible idea to fill up completely for breakfast if you were going to do harsh workouts. As such, Izuku was working on his analysis notebook and trying to figure out a way to better use the quirk via his quirk analysis, but for some reason, he was just stuck and wasn't able to figure it out when a knock on the door happened. He got up and went to go see who it was, and Izuku found a shorter old male standing in front of his door. "Hello sir, I am assuming you're 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏?" Izuku asked, and the old man nodded his head. "Hello sir, I am assuming you're 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏?" Izuku asked, and the old man nodded his head. "I'm assuming you're Izuku Midoriya, Toshinori's boy?" 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏 asked, and Izuku blushed a bit at how he was called All Might's boy but nodded his head. "Would you like to come in for tea or we starting right away?" "I am prepared for either," Izuku said, and 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏 looked him up and down and noticed that Izuku was indeed dressed to start training. "This kid is willing to go right away, that is good. Toshi told me about how he got kicked out because of Eraserhead, but it looks like his determination hasn't broken and was only damaged temporarily." 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏 thought and nodded his head. "We're leaving to train now. Does your mother know you are leaving and won't be back likely until dark?" he asked, and Izuku nodded his head, and right then Izuku Midoriya came up. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏 introduced himself and told her that he was taking Izuku out to train all day. "We got roughly a week before you start at Shiketsu. As such, I won't be holding back. We are going until you drop from exhaustion since we need you to get some form of control quickly so you stop breaking your bones. Do you know any good places to train in the area? Otherwise, I am just taking you out into the middle of the forest to train." 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏 asked, and Izuku thought it over. "There is the beach. All Might had me completely clean in the 10 months to build my body up. I don't know if people have started visiting it yet, but we likely should go to the forest so we don't disturb people," Izuku stated, and 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏 nodded his head and jumped on Izuku's back. "Let's train then. I'm assuming you know where the XXX forest is at from here?" 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏 asked, and Izuku nodded his head. "Good, get running then, and don't drop me, brat, or I will kick you in the guts," 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏 said, and Izuku started to run as he grabbed his backpack from the door and put it on. After running with 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏 on his back for about 40 minutes, Izuku arrived at the forest near his city. They entered the forest for about 5 minutes of jogging on an old trail, and they found a small open field area in between all of the trees. "Let's stop here since this is a good spot since it gives us enough space to move around," 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏 said as he jumped off Izuku's back. Izuku pulled a water bottle out of his bag and drank a bit of it before putting it back. He was glad he stocked the bag with energy bars and water to help him. He then looked at 𝗵𝗃, who was looking around before looking back at Izuku. Okay kid, I want you to tell me about your quirk. Give me what you think it is and then let's go from there. 𝗵𝗃 stated, and Izuku looked confused. It's a stockpiling quirk that enhances my body. The energy grows with each passing as it is built up by each user before they pass it along. That is why it's breaking my body due to All Might building it up so much that I can't contain it when I punch something. Izuku stated, and 𝗵𝗃 moved his head a bit and looked at Izuku. Then Izuku was shocked when 𝗵𝗃 said that Izuku was limiting himself and was off slightly. Think of what it does and tell me what you are doing wrong. You have the pieces, you are just not seeing it because you are limiting yourself. Until you get it, I want you to start doing push-ups. 𝗵𝗃 said as he got on Izuku's back for extra weight. Izuku started to do the push-ups and thought about why he was limiting himself. How am I limiting myself? I am using the quirk like All Might is. I am bringing the energy up into my body and punching, Izuku said while he muttered, and 𝗵𝗃 listened in. That's a part of your problem kid, you're trying to copy All Might, 𝗵𝗃 thought as he just sat on Izuku's back. Soon a few hours passed and 𝗵𝗃 kept making Izuku to different workouts from planking, push-ups, pull-ups off a tree branch, doing running around a part of the path and back, and to many other things. 𝗵𝗃 would also from time to time attack Izuku and force him to dodge and try to block the attacks. However, 𝗵𝗃 was fast with his quirk and landed a lot of hits into Izuku's stomach or back. Izuku had even thrown up a few times as well due to the force of the kicks. As the night was coming to a close, Izuku froze while he was cooking the food. 𝗵𝗃 had made a fire pit with some rocks and twigs and started a fire. He then went and caught fish out of the small river that flowed through the forest area and made Izuku cook them. As Izuku was sitting there frozen, he was looking at the fish. He then placed one part of the fish in the fire too much and it burned. What the hell are you doing kid? If you put it too much in one, 𝗵𝗃 was saying but was cut off. I need to distribute it, God, I was so stupid. Izuku thought as he stood up and said he was the fish. 𝗵𝗃 looked at him as if Izuku had gone crazy. Are you okay kid? Did I push you too far? He asked Izuku, who shook his head. No. I am the fish and one for all is the fire, I mean ugh. It's I've been putting too much power into one portion of my body. Instead of doing that, I need to distribute the power across my entire body to increase my ability to handle it. It's like cooking the fish. If you leave it in one spot only, then it burns while everything else stays uncooked. It's similar to my body and one for all. If I put too much power in one spot, then I blow up and break, but if I were to distribute it, then I can handle more power. The problem now is the power max I can hold. Izuku stated with a smile on his face, and 𝗵𝗃 nodded his head. Congratulations kid, and you got it in one day. Now, moving forward, we will work on limiting the output and getting you to the correct power output that your body can handle. Once we find that out, we can train your body up more, and the more you use one for all, the better adapted your body will be to it and will be able to handle more of it. 𝗵𝗃 said, and Izuku asked him if he knew what he was doing wrong the entire time, and 𝗵𝗃 nodded his head, which confused Izuku. Kid, if you are just given the answer, then you won't learn to think the problems out yourself or how to teach the 10th user later on in the future. I think that is where Toshinori lacks, since he was able to handle all 100% unlike you. He received it when he was far buffer than you, and the quirk was far weaker, as such he didn't have these issues. However, you now know the correct way to apply the quirk moving forward, and we just need to work on output, but let's hold off until tomorrow. It's getting late and I want more than fish, so let's head to your home. I've just texted your mother, we are heading back. 𝗵𝗃 stated, and Izuku nodded his head as he packed everything up and put the fire out and made sure the embers were all cold. Then 𝗵𝗃 got onto Izuku's back and they left again as Izuku did the 45 minutes run from the forest to the house again. Izuku could be seen on the floor in his living room as he was dead tired. 𝗵𝗃 was just laughing his butt off as All Might was trembling in a corner and Inko was trying to see if her son was okay. Izuku soon made his way into the couch and sat there. "I can see why Dad's terrified of you," Izuku muttered, and 𝗵𝗃𝗃 looked at him with a smile. "Oh, kid, that was nothing. Wait until we get your quirk under control," 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said, and Izuku paled. "Speaking of quirks, any progress?" All Might asked, far away from 𝗵𝗃𝗃, and Izuku lit up like a Christmas tree, and 𝗵𝗃𝗃 just shook his head with a laugh. "Actually, yes. We figured out what I was doing wrong but didn't get to test how much I can use. We're holding off until tomorrow, but I was being an idiot and putting everything into just my arms or legs, and that was destroying my body. Instead, I need to distribute everything across my entire body, but we need to test to see what percentage I can currently use," Izuku said with a smile, and All Might was glad. Inko was glad as well, since it meant getting closer to Izuku not blowing his body up. Soon they all sat down and started to eat dinner. Inko had asked 𝗵𝗃𝗃 where he was staying while in town, and he said he was going to check into a local hotel, but she wouldn't have it and wanted him to stay in the spare room that they had, which he gave into and agreed to do. The second day of training arrived, and they also had an awkward day as well, as Bakugo's mother ended up calling Izuku's mother, Izuku Midoriya, because Bakugo had told her that Izuku had gotten expelled from UA. Inko acknowledges that he did indeed get expelled due to some stupid quirk apprehension test, and it turns out Bakugo's mother still didn't know that Izuku had a quirk since Bakugo didn't tell her. As such, Inko updated her friend on the quirk that had suddenly appeared the day of the entrance exam and how it had broken both of Izuku's legs and arm. On that note, All Might was still digging into why Izuku Midoriya was never informed about Izuku's injuries. He didn't want to arouse suspicions, so he was trying to tread carefully on the topic while searching through all of UA's rules. However, back to the phone call. Izuku, 𝗵𝗃𝗃, and All Might were all in the room eating breakfast when the phone call happened. All Might didn't need to go to the school that day since he had no classes scheduled. 1B would be having their combat lesson on Thursday, and it was currently Wednesday right now. As they were sitting there, All Might felt the name Bakugo was familiar to him for some reason. He knew he had a Bakugo in 1A, but for some reason outside of that, he felt the name was familiar. As the phone call was going on, Izuku was worried All Might would remember what he talked about in regards to a canon who he had let slip in regards to his name being Bakugo Katsuki. Izuku had told All Might about 6 months ago a good portion of his past and all of the bullyings he received during school. All Might agreed with Izuku to not do anything per his request since he would be out of the school, but that didn't stop All Might from tipping off his detective friend though. As the conversation was coming to an end, Inko handed the phone up and started talking to Izuku. "Katsuki told his mother about you being kicked out. I went with a general answer to it all and shifted it to the topic of your quirk coming in, so she dropped in. She doesn't know you're going to another hero school though, since I doubt we want people knowing so quickly. I remember when you would always bring Katsuki over and you still used that nickname Kaken for him as well. It's so sweet," Inko said, and at that moment Izuku knew he was screwed, as All Might had dropped his coffee mug on the ground and it broke. Everyone looked at him except Izuku. All Might looked at Izuku in disbelief and called out to him. "Please, for the love of God, don't tell me your mother knows the truth," All Might stated, and Inko was confused as she was cleaning the coffee and mug up and looked between the two of them. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 was just in a state of confusion. Izuku just didn't answer, which confirmed for All Might. "Oh, Izuku, how much does she not know?" he asked her, and Izuku had tears going down his face as he waved his hands in the air. "I'm taking that as none of it then, okay, want me to tell her, and so you can calm down, because this conversation does need to happen, son. She needs to know the truth of what has happened to you," All Might stated, and Izuku nodded his head and hugged All Might. All Might suggested for him to go lay down on the couch and he will start the conversation in a moment. Inko and 𝗵𝗃𝗃 looked worried and confused at the same time. After finishing cleaning up the mess with Inko, everyone made their way to the couch in the living room area and sat down. Izuku had laid against All Might, who was rubbing Izuku's back. "Inko, as you know, I was the 8th user of One for All. Now, what do you think my quirk was?" he asked her, and she had no answer but suggested it was his ability to transform to a buff form. That would be a good guess, but even I don't know how I do that. It's like one for all is helping me keep running right now with that. No, I was quirkless just like Izuku. All Might said, and her eyes widened a bit and understood more of how easily they got close to each other since they share that together. All Might took a deep breath in and just kept rubbing Izuku's back as he was calming down, but All Might knew that wasn't going to last. Inko, how much do you know of Izuku's life as a quirkless child? All Might asked, since he was sure the woman had no idea, nor could he fault her for it since Izuku is DMN good at hiding things. He hid that he was overworking from All Might several times, which was strong to do. Inko explained what she knew of her son's life and that he did face some discrimination due to being quirkless, and All Might sighed at the woman lacking understanding. I just want you to know, in no way do I nor Izuku blame you for not knowing. Most people don't know nor realize how bad it is. It wasn't as bad for me since quirkless people were more common for my generation, but for Izuku's god it's hell. All Might stated, and Inko was starting to get worried. She asked what she meant. Inko, Bakugo Katsuki has bullied your son mentally and physically for 10 years now. He and other people have used Izuku as a quirk test dummy for the most part, and the teachers at his school encouraged it. Izuku's grades would be sabotaged and Izuku would be reprimanded for things that were never his fault solely for the fact that Izuku was quirkless. All Might stated, and Inko was in disbelief that the boy she saw as a nephew would do such things to her son simply for the fact that Izuku was quirkless. She was trying to hold back tears and wanted to deny it, but the more she thought about it the more it made sense on why no one came to his birthday parties, why Katsuki never came to the house, and why Izuku always wore long-sleeve shirts. Oh God, she thought as she looked at Izuku. Sweetie, the reason why you wear long-sleeve shirts, it's to hide the scars, isn't it? God, how did I never notice the changes? She stated as tears came down her face and Gran Torino was off to the side. He knew the numbers for quirkless people, and honestly he was kind of shocked that he didn't see many signs in Izuku of bullying, but he finally figured out that the kid wore a pretty DMN good mask and hid it well. Izuku pulled his shirt off and you could see the number of scars from burn marks and cuts on his body, and they was plentiful. All Might then informed Inko of the statistics on quirkless children being suicide baited, which was roughly 4 times a month. Izuku, did he? She asked, and everyone knew what she was asking, and Izuku could only nod his head to her question, which made her sick to her stomach. Why did you never come to me about it? She asked him, and he didn't turn around to face her but did speak. You were already stressed enough with taking care of me all of these years. Even if I told you, nothing could be done about it. I've tried the police before and they did nothing about it. A police officer caught Bakugo beating me up and using his quirk illegally once, and he did nothing. He told them to just wrong along and not get caught next time since they were using their quirks illegally. He said nothing about harming me, though the officer was only worried about them getting caught for illegal quirk usage. So I kept silent because I knew nothing would change. It's part of the reason I wanted to be a hero so badly. I want to be a beacon of light for everyone this society has pushed aside and abused, Izuku said without stuttering much as he stopped crying already. His tears were dried as he felt drained from the topic. Everyone was silent for a bit at what he said, and All Might was that the police did nothing about Izuku's situation when they could have. Soon things calmed down and Izuku had promised his mother that he would talk to her more, but Inko then that Toshinori was likely the first one to hear about anything being wrong since the two were so close and they had a bond that she wouldn't have due to them both being born quirkless. She wasn't envious of it, no, she was glad that it was there since it meant Izuku wouldn't suffer in silence anymore, and that is what she could ask for the most. All Might did make the comment that Bakugo had tried to attack Izuku at the quirk apprehension test and that he would be looking in to ensure he had it marked that he was at least warned about it happening if Eraserhead hadn't already made a warning about it in the kid's files. Sadly, without evidence that supported Izuku's claims of everything that happened, they would have an uphill battle on getting anything more than that since the detective was already looking into the school itself. It was none by the time the conversation had come to an end and Gran Torino decided against going out and practicing. Instead, he had Izuku sit on the floor of the apartment and they would train in the house. You are not going to move at all with your quirk on. You are working on just calling it up and off, that's it. 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 stated, and Izuku nodded his head, and that was how Izuku spent the rest of the day doing, as he would turn it on and endure the pain before turning it off. He was calling it on at 100%, which hurt like hell for him, but unless he moved then it wouldn't blow him up. 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 had taken Izuku back up to the forest area where they went the last time and had started their training. Over the past few days, they had learned multiple things and had increased their progress on Izuku getting some form of control of one for all. On the first day of training, Izuku had learned that he needed to distribute the energy across his entire body instead of doing it to just one or multiple body parts. The second day after the eventful conversation and stopping Izuku Midoriya from going to murder some people and convincing All Might that he, the symbol of peace, could not murder a child at UA by accident was a bad thing, had allowed Izuku to increase the speed at which he called the quirk up and spread it across his body. Now, instead of almost a minute of trying to get it done, he was able to summon the quirk up within seconds. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing right now in life and death fight if he ever found himself in one. Now, it was the third day of training and Izuku would be trying to gain some form of output control. This would be the critical step in stopping him from breaking his bones all of the time and the path for him to start working on increasing his control, which 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 was itching to get to do since he liked the kid's drive to get stronger and the reasons for being a hero. As they were working in the forest and Izuku had completed his training routine that he started since the hell training under All Might, 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 had him stand in the circle he drew in the dirt and focus on the quirk. I don't really know how the blonde idiot does his mental image on controlling the output, but a suggestion you could use is like a dimmer 𝗬𝗪𝗃𝗃. If you push it all the way to the top then you got full power, but if you pull it down then you dim the energy going to the light, which makes it brighter or lighter depending if you up the power or lower the power. 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 stated since he knew the kid had weird mental images based on the fish from the last time they were up in the forest. Don't need a weird mental image making it harder for him to control. 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 thought and watched Izuku. You know what 100% feels like, now you need to get as little as possible that your body doesn't feel like you're going to fall over and break if you move. 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 stated, and Izuku remained silent but nodded his head as he was concentrating. Izuku was standing there for about 10 minutes before he turned the quirk on and it was at 100%, but soon 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 felt the pressure the kid was giving off lighten up, but a large amount. However, from the looks of things, it seemed as if the Izuku was still using too much power as Izuku was gritting his teeth and clenching his fists. I wonder how much he is currently using. 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 thought as he told Izuku to stop and relax for a bit. He looked him over and didn't see any injuries, which was a very good thing for their progress in only 3 days so far. How much do you think you were putting off, since I know you decreased it from 100%? 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 asked. Izuku thought about it and shrugged a bit. To be honest, I don't know for sure, but I think about 50% is where it was at. It felt as if half of the power that I was pushing out went away, so I think we can say around the 50% mark due to how it felt, but again I don't know for sure. Izuku stated, and 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 thought about it but nodded his head. It was most likely around 50% as you think. If it felt as if half the power went away then we can assume 50%. We need to get below 10% in all honesty, since I think you can currently only do 2 to 5% without any problems and 10% will likely fracture bones. 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 stated, and Izuku looked down at hearing those numbers and 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 scoffed. Kid, you better not be looking down on 2% of one for all. Remember, that is still a very powerful attack compared to most people and will likely knock a lot of the weaker opponents out easily. I doubt you will ever use more than 30% unless you come up against a really powerful villain. All Might himself limits his power as well and uses only 100% on really strong opponents that can take the punches or won't die, like the sludge villain. He used 100% to blast the villain apart since it wouldn't die, but also to create the rain in a heavy amount, even though he could do it at maybe 45%, but it would only create light rain since he is not in his prime anymore and has grown weaker due to his injuries and age. 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 said, and Izuku lit up at the information and small pep talk that 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 gave him. Soon they contained this training but didn't make much more progress, as they called it a day, as it was starting to push into the afternoon and All Might should be arriving at Izuku's home if he hasn't already. They had guessed Izuku was able to get control down to about 40% right now, which was amazing progress from 100%, but not where he needed to be. They still had a few more days and 𝗵𝗃 felt comfortable that Izuku would make it before school started. Now while they were training all day, 𝗲𝗵𝗃 had his own showdown. 𝗲𝗵𝗃 had started to look at all of the students' files as an excuse to bring up the 𝗵𝗃𝗁 file because as he looked into 𝗵𝗃𝗁's file he noticed that 𝗳𝗏 had not made any remakes about 𝗵𝗃𝗁's attempt to attack Izuku Midoriya on the first day of school, which annoyed 𝗲𝗵𝗃. 𝗲𝗵𝗃 waited until the lunch period when both he and 𝗳𝗏 would be in the same room but also with other staff members so they could hear the conversation as well. 21 As 𝗲𝗵𝗃 was sitting there, Nezu had come into the room before any of the other staff did. He asked 𝗲𝗵𝗃 why he was going through all the student files. "I doubt you would believe a lie, so in truth, I am using it as an excuse to pin 𝗳𝗏 on the fact that he failed to report an attempted assault with a quirk incident during the first day when he did his quirk test. 𝗵𝗃𝗁 attempted to attack Izuku Midoriya and there are no marks of punishment or a warning have been given. How is the school meant to punish 𝗵𝗃𝗁 if he keeps making mistakes and staff doesn't make marks about it?" 𝗲𝗵𝗃 stated, and Nezu's eyes widened a bit and knew 𝗲𝗵𝗃 was being a bit petty but didn't know the full reasons, but he also had to agree that 𝗳𝗏 did fail to report the incident in the files like he should have. 𝗲𝗵𝗃 also told Nezu that he sent an email to him about a case that the detective was working on that involved Izuku's old school and some issues about it. Nezu pulled his phone out of his pocket and reviewed the email and was disturbed at what he read. "I assume you get why I am a bit petty here, but also the reason these events need to be marked on his record since he's gotten away with it all in the past. I refuse to allow it to happen here," 𝗲𝗵𝗃 said, and Nezu reread the email before looking at 𝗲𝗵𝗃. "You got my full support. I've been meaning to talk to 𝗳𝗏 about his expulsion privilege, but I will push that off for now since I don't want to tip him as to why you are going after him. Nor do we need to be accused of favoritism or your connection as Izuku's 𝗵𝗃𝗲 known to anyone in UA outside of myself. I don't think Recovery Girl has figured it out either yet, so let's keep it like that, yes?" Nezu asked, and 𝗲𝗵𝗃 nodded his head. The only people that knew outside of 𝗵𝗃𝗁, Nezu, Inko, Shiketsu's principal, and himself about Izuku being the 9th user was the detective. 𝗳𝗏𝗃𝗏 was not informed and thinks that 𝗲𝗵𝗃 still has the quirk which he wanted to keep like that since 𝗳𝗏𝗃𝗏 was very pushy on making the 3rd year at UA the 9th user. Recovery Girl wouldn't be informed since she wouldn't be in contact with Izuku anymore moving forward, and if he was then they would tell her at that point. 27 𝗲𝗵𝗃 had talked to 𝗵𝗃𝗁 about it last night and 𝗵𝗃𝗁 agreed that 𝗳𝗏𝗃𝗏 shouldn't be told currently. 𝗵𝗃𝗁 at first thought 𝗳𝗏𝗃𝗏 should be told that 𝗲𝗵𝗃 didn't have it anymore, but knowing more about Izuku changed his mind since he learned of the kid's past. 𝗵𝗃𝗁 knew Izuku would have issues with confidence for a while, but it could be built up. 𝗲𝗵𝗃 was told by 𝗵𝗃𝗁 to come clean that 𝗳𝗏𝗃𝗏 knows about it and had recommended another person so Izuku would never be caught off guard if 𝗳𝗏𝗃𝗏 found Izuku and confronted him about it. 𝗲𝗵𝗃 agreed to talk to Izuku about it soon and had even asked 𝗵𝗃𝗁 to let it slip on purpose in a conversation and help soothe Izuku's worries, but tell Izuku that 𝗲𝗵𝗃 never consider it because in honesty he knew of the 3rd year but never met him and only agreed to meet the kid to stop 𝗳𝗏𝗃𝗏 from pushing it all of the time, but 𝗲𝗵𝗃 had cancelled the meeting the day he found Izuku, which did raise some questions, but 𝗲𝗵𝗃 dodged them and blamed it on the sludge villain incident and using up all of his time that day, which was a perfect excuse. Anyway, Nezu decided to go sit at the desk at the end of the staff room and fake doing some work since he wanted to see how the conversation between 𝗲𝗵𝗃 and 𝗳𝗏 went and so he could stop it if it went too far. As such, about 10 minutes later most of the staff walked in and Eraserhead did as well. As 𝗲𝗵𝗃 was completely reading through the students' files, he had come upon 𝗵𝗃𝗁's file after a few minutes of 𝗳𝗏 being in the room. "Young 𝗳𝗏, I've been reading through the students' files and trying to get to know them a bit more, and I noticed you didn't make any marks about the attempted assault with a quirk incident that young 𝗵𝗃𝗁 did on the first day. May I ask why?" 𝗲𝗵𝗃 stated, and the room went silent as everyone was confused about what they were hearing. It was also ironic that the news teacher was educating for the most part the experienced teacher on how to do his job. 𝗳𝗏 shuffled up and out of his sleeping bag and looked at 𝗲𝗵𝗃 with a blank face. "I warned him that day it was not going to be tolerated. I saw no need to push it further than that since the student he did it against was expelled regardless," 𝗳𝗏 said, and 𝗲𝗵𝗃 didn't let his emotions get the better of him as he easily replied back. Even if the said student got expelled, it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be marked down. It's a clear violation of the rules of UA. If 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗁's habit continues, then we need a clear record of his events to use against him if we were to ever try and force him into therapy or anger management to try to correct issues if he refuses to do so by himself. We would also need it if we sought harsher punishments for repeated offenses. I must insist that the incident be recorded down. 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃 stated, and before 𝗳𝗏 could even say anything, Nezu spoke up. 𝗳𝗏, he's right, you know. That is something that needs to be marked down. It'd be one thing if it was just verbal, but from what I'm getting and now looking at on camera, it turned physical and needs to be marked down, so do it. Nezu stated, and 𝗳𝗏 was shocked that Nezu was getting involved with his students. Before 𝗳𝗏 could make any comment, Nezu spoke up again with a perfect excuse on why he was getting involved in his class. You did expel the said student. He attempted to attack. If the family of that student attempted to sue or anything and they brought that matter up and it wasn't recorded, then they would have a solid case for discrimination against UA, since it would appear as if you sided with the other student and expel the other one for no good reason outside of you saying he didn't have potential. I don't like being kept wide open like that, 𝗳𝗏. Nezu stated, and 𝗳𝗏 nodded his head and said he would make the mark of the incident in the system as he stood up and went to his desk to do it. 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃 just went to the next student file and started to read it, so 𝗳𝗏 didn't expect a thing of him purposely bringing 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗁's file up. Soon the day came to an end and 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃 returned to the Midoriya home, since he's been spending a lot of time there when he was off. He even spent less time patrolling since he wanted to spend as much time as he could with Izuku before he went off to the new school. It was now Friday and Izuku could be seen up in the forest with 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 and 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃. 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃 didn't have any classes or anything scheduled today, so he decided to accompany the pair up to the forest to train. They also made Izuku carry both 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃 and 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃, but 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃, luckily for Izuku, was in his skinny form and not the buff form. As such, it was a bit extra weight for the 45-minute run that Izuku had to do from the apartment to the forest location. Izuku was, but he didn't breathe as strong as he did the first time he did the 45 minutes run, so the training was having some improvement for him. After Izuku did his normal set of workout routines, he sat down and took a drink of water for a bit before they started the quirk training. Okay brat, we have today, and the weekend before you and I start up at Shiketsu High School. The goal is to get a form of control you can use and move around with before Monday, and I believe you can do it. It doesn't need to be perfect, but you just need some simple control. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 stated as Izuku nodded his head. 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 sat down on a boulder that was off to the side. He came in the event Izuku was able to get some form of control so they could use him as a sparring partner to take the powerful hits. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 could really only take a few hits in his old age, even though he didn't think he would get hit, they just wanted to be prepared. Izuku soon got to work on decreasing the amount of power he was pulling out and had spent about a few hours and had gotten down from 40% to 35%, which was good progress. As they took a break, 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 decided to ask Izuku what mental image he was using to control the power output, and Izuku described the dimmer 𝗬𝗍𝐶H, which earned a nod from 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃. Okay, I want to suggest a slightly different mental image moving forward, and let's see if it has an impact. First, when you think of the power of one for all inside of you, what do you visualize it as? I see it as an Olympics torch-type flame where I am pulling the power from. 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 state, and Izuku thought about it and described what he visualized the power itself as. I see it as fire as well, since I figured out how to distribute the power across me when I did the cooking of the fish, so that is what happened. Why? Izuku asked, and 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 nodded his head and started to explain as 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 listened in to make sure nothing stupid happened. Okay, we are still using the dimmer idea, but in a different way. One for all needs to be always on in a sense, as it fills you with power. So instead of just thinking of how much power you want, imagine the flames coming to your body, but start imaging them smaller size, from a huge flame to a tiny flame, and the more you pull the dimmer down, the smaller they get. 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 suggest, and 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 had to admit that it was a good idea to use and might actually work out in the end. Izuku decided to test the suggestion out and stood up. As he stood up, he turned the quirk on using the visual method in the back of his mind, and it went straight to 100%, but he imaged the flames that surrounded his body growing smaller as he decreased the dimmer down, as if he was restricting the gas fueling the flame. As he did this, the two adults could see the power he was putting off go from 100% and was making good progress downwards until it reached a point that they didn't think it was going down anymore. 𝗵𝗃 spoke up and asked how much he thought he was currently at. I think about 25% right now. I think I can push it down a bit more, so give me a bit of time. Izuku said, and they waited for him to work on it. They had to admit going from 35% to 25% was a good jump since he started out at 40% at the start of the day. Soon, Izuku opened his eyes and looked around. I think I have it as far as I can actually take it right now, Izuku said, and they asked what he thought he was at. Izuku thought for a moment and spoke. I think I'm sitting at around 5%. I can feel tingling sensations in my body, but it doesn't hurt like it does if I take it up to 10%, Izuku said as he increased the power, and the little arcs of lighting that came off his body increased a bit and Izuku's fists gripped shot until he brought it down. Yeah, taking it to 10% of one for all, or what I am thinking is 10% starts hurting as if I'm being stabbed with a lot of needles non-stop. I think I might be able to throw a punch without hurting myself. I might start bruising if I used it at 5% and do it non-stop, but as my body adjusts I will be fine. Izuku stated, and they both nodded their heads and suggested him to take a step with 5% activated. Izuku did just that and took a step and then another step as he wasn't blowing himself up as he did it. Izuku jumped with joy and screwed up since he forgot he had won for all on as he went about halfway up the height of the tree. Then when he realized what he did, he came plummeting down, but All Might grabbed him in his buff form. Good job, Izuku. Now, be careful since you need to get used to having a quirk that can do these types of things so you don't hurt yourself on the fall down. All Might stated, and Izuku nodded his head. 𝗵𝗃 told Izuku to sit down and finish eating before his food goes cold. Izuku gave him a "Are you serious?" look since the food was a cold type of food as they were eating sandwiches out of an icebox that All Might had carried, or rather Izuku carried up to the forest. 𝗵𝗃 just chuckled as they all sat down and finished eating. About 30 minutes later they all got up and All Might be buffed up. They wanted Izuku to throw a punch at All Might at his current limit and see how TI feels for All Might. The reason for this is because we know one for all undergoes a small boost after the transfer. Most of it increases in strength once the user grows it once they hit 100%, but it does receive a small boost due to the transfer, which we don't know how it works. So we need to see how your 5% feels to All Might and what he thinks it is on his scale of his power. 𝗵𝗃 stated, and Izuku nodded his head as he powered up and kicked off as he landed a punch in All Might's hand that slightly pushed him back. All Might shook his hand a bit and thought for a few minutes. From what I can assume, I think it would be about 6 or 7%, meaning that the boost Izuku received is indeed a small one like we thought, but his 100% would be around 110% or 120% compared to my 100%, which is significant when you get up to those higher numbers. That not even including that 100% isn't his stopping point since each user grows the quirk to be stronger and adds to the pool of energy as they grow it. All Might said, and they were glad they had a measurement of where his power compared to All Might's. After talking a bit more, it was time to spar, and it was time for 𝗵𝗃 to get his more hellish training in. Think fast, kid. 𝗵𝗃 yelled as he attacked Izuku, who dodged just slightly in time to avoid getting hit since he still had the quirk on. Wait, what? Izuku asked, confused, as 𝗵𝗃 bounced off the trees around them and came back for another attack. Your aim is to hit me or capture me. So get to work, it's time to get combat training in. 𝗵𝗃 stated, and Izuku's eyes widened and started to move around with one for all, which he fumbled at and had a strong time keeping at the 5% mark. Izuku had to let it go several times due to almost going over his limit, but would turn it back on each time and quickly get down to 5%, which was good in 𝗵𝗃's mind. 16 Soon, Izuku started to adapt to the style of fighting 𝗵𝗃 was using and was bouncing off the trees, and right as the timer went off that All Might had said, Izuku had almost landed a hit on 𝗵𝗃. Though unknown to Izuku, he had slightly touched 𝗵𝗃 and made a small cut that bled slightly, but 𝗵𝗃 wiped it away before Izuku could see it. Almost had me, kid, but you are adapting quickly. However, congratulations on getting a form of control before you start at Shiketsu, and it only took you 3 days to do it. I would be extremely proud if I were you, kid, since that is no easy feat since you are walking around with power as strong as All Might right off the back. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 stated as they sat down for a break. As they were sitting down, 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 thought it was time for Izuku to learn of 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃 and who that man was trying to force All Might to give the quirk to. So Toshinori, 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃 hasn't been bugging you again lately, has he? 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 said as he looked at All Might, who got the hint of what 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 wanted to do, and All Might shook his head. Luckily no, though it's only a matter of time before he brings the conversation up again. Though, I have no intentions of telling him about Izuku currently since I don't want him hounding Izuku. All Might stated, and Izuku looked confused and asked what they were talking about. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 then looked at Izuku and adapted an exhausted tone as he spoke. Listen up, kid, has this idiot told you who all knows about One for All, or did he forget again? 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 said, and All Might admitted he forgot again, which caused 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 to shake his head. Though, it works out for this conversation. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 thought as he started to explain. I'll explain it since he keeps forgetting. The people who currently know of One for All include All Might, Recovery Girl at UA, Principal Nezu at UA, So at Shiketsu, a police detective named 𝗬𝗍𝗄𝐵𝗃𝗃, myself, your mother, you, and finally 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃, the former sidekick of All Might. The list has grown to 9 people now, which is a bit too many in my view right now, but oh well. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 stated, and Izuku nodded his head in understanding. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 then pushed forward. All Might and 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃 separated after 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃 looked into All Might's here future and saw his death. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 stated and laid on the table, and All Might coughed since he didn't plan to talk about that. Izuku's eyes widened in surprise and looked at All Might. You're going to die? Izuku asked in shock, and All Might sighed and glared at 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁, who glared back. 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃 visions get blurry the further he looks into the future. My supposed death should happen this year or next. However, I will admit until I met you I didn't have the will to keep pushing forward due to the grim prediction, but I refuse to die too easily with you in my life, son. I won't go away so easily, I promise you that. All Might stated, and Izuku hugged the man and said they would fight it together, which made everyone smile. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 then got their attention again. Anyway, they soon broke off their partnership since All Might wanted to keep pushing forward as the symbol of peace, and 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃 refused to watch him die a slow death. Whatever anyway, 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃 thought it was his duty to find a new user for One for All. This means that 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃 went out and trained someone to become the new vessel in his words for the quirk and has been pushing All Might to pick them. The person is a student at UA and is a 3rd year. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 said, and Izuku looked at All Might and looked as if he had questions which All Might knew he had. First, I will admit I had planned to meet the student of 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃 the day I ran into you and offered it to you. I was getting tired of 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃 bugging me about setting up a meeting. However, you happened and you became the 9th user of the quirk. 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃 does not know about you currently since I decided not to tell him that I gave it away. As such, he still thinks I have it. All Might stated, and at that moment 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 jumped in with his views. Listen, I don't agree with how 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃 went about this. One for All is meant to be passed down at the user's will. The 7th user Nana, All Might's MSTR, and my friend found All Might on the street almost like he did you. She picked him herself and he did the same with you. The next user isn't meant to be trained and groomed by another person. The user of the quirk is meant to do the job. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 stated with a frown as he spoke about it, and Izuku felt better at 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁's words, which they noticed. Overall, 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 was never asked to do what he did, and the kid 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗁 Togata, which is a 3rd year, is not the rightful heir of One for All if 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 or anyone else tells you that. You are the sole and only actual person truly considered as a candidate for One for All, and you received it in the end. As such, the topic of who the quirk belongs to is over and it's yours. If 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 ever finds about you being the 9th user and comes and talks to you about it, then I want you to do one simple thing, you hear me? 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 asked, and Izuku leaned in and nodded. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 then raised his middle finger and said, flip him the bird and tell him to go F off, as he has no say in who the quirk goes to, and the topic is closed. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 said with a smirk, and Izuku choked on his water that he was drinking, and All Might told 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 to stop being a bad influence. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 was just laughing as he saw Izuku choke on the water. Listen Izuku, I never had an actual thought of giving 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗀𝗃 the quirk. I agreed to the meeting for him to stop bugging me about it, but right now I don't want him knowing about you since he has no reason to know who the 9th user is since he's not involved with you. Even Recovery Girl doesn't know who you are. Well, she knows you as a former student but not as the 9th user. She won't unless she has a viable need to be present in your life like she does with me and caring for my injury. All Might stated, and Izuku nodded his head in understanding. Soon it was getting a bit in the afternoon and they decided to call it quits for the day since Izuku had already gained a loose control of one for all, which they were proud about. They also decided not to do any training on the weekend since Izuku needed to rest and be ready for the first day of school at 𝗳𝗃𝗃𝗃, and they also needed to pack him up for the move to the campus dorms. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 was also returning home that night as well to start packing more of his things to move into the campus dorms as well since he would live on campus as staff. This would allow him to be near Izuku more and train. Izuku was told to just practice turning the quirk on at 5% so it became natural to him and holding it for as long as he could before he got exhausted from using it. He was then to repeat the process after he rested for a bit and keep doing it during the entire weekend to help his body adapt to the quirk. The weekend came and went quite quickly in Izuku's opinion. Izuku had spent most of the weekend either packing his things up to go to Shiketsu High School or working on holding one for all for as long as he could without breaking his concentration. Izuku would keep the quirk on even when he was just packing his things or even just sitting down to eat. He wanted the best results he could get before he arrived at Shiketsu because deep down inside of Izuku he felt embarrassed that he had been kicked out of UA even though it was changed to a withdraw. It didn't change the feeling of helplessness that he had felt when Eraserhead looked him in the eyes and told him he could never be a hero. Izuku did end up having a conversation with All Might Saturday night about his feelings of anger towards how Eraserhead treated him due to him only having the quirk for 2 months and how he felt discriminated against. It was honestly a good thing that Izuku did have the conversation with All Might since he didn't know how many emotions he had built up in regards to the entire UA fiasco. Izuku felt better after unleashing his emotions about his dissatisfaction in regards to UA and Eraserhead since it had left him a bit bitter about the school, but after talking to All Might he didn't feel as bitter. All Might said it was fine to feel bitter and anger towards Eraserhead and UA, but that Izuku needed to apply the anger and bitterness towards productive things instead of just letting them eat at him. All Might suggested that when he felt anger or bitterness that he go out and train physically so he would start distracting himself. Outside of those things, Izuku, Inko, All Might, and 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 were all ready for the trip down to Shiketsu. It was Sunday now and around 10 a.m. and it would take about 2 hours via the train system to arrive in the west of Japan. As the 4 of them were sitting on the train, All Might looked over to Izuku and asked if he was using his quirk. Izuku nodded his head and spoke. I'm running it at 1%, through the practicing since Friday afternoon. I have been able to push it down that far and I'm running it at such a low point that the green lighting arcs don't appear on my body. This way I can still get some training in even when we are just sitting on the train. Izuku stated, and All Might nodded his head. He knew he should scold Izuku for using his quirk in public but let it go with a warning. Don't do it in front of other people outside of the family. Don't need you getting hit up with illegal quirk charges. All Might stated, and Izuku nodded his head. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 was listening in and was impressed with Izuku's progress. The kid went from getting it to a low number of 5% to 1% and constantly having it on without energy showing at the low number. This kid's determination and will is strong as hell Toshi. Now, I wonder how far he will want me to push him when it comes to training since I think he's done letting himself be looked down upon and shoved around by others. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 thought as he sat on the train and acted like he was asleep. Inko was just looking out of the window and wasn't paying attention as she was enjoying the different sights since she hardly comes out to this side of Japan. Soon, the trip came to an end and they got off at a station that was only a quarter of a mile from the train station. As such, they decided to just walk since all of Izuku's belongings that he wanted to be taken to the dorm were sent the night before so they would be in the dorm room already. After walking for a quarter of a mile they soon arrived at Shiketsu High School and Izuku was stunned at the sight of the school. After walking for a quarter of a mile, they soon arrived at 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗃 High School, and Izuku was stunned at the sight of the school's 67. 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗃 High School's main buildings were a bit more spread out until UA's, where it was 4 tall towers connected to each other. Instead, they were spread out and had some training buildings nearby as well, with the dorms from what Izuku could guess were off to the right side of the campus. I think I like this campus better. It doesn't have the number of buildings and training grounds that UA has from the looks of it, but it still looks quite amazing. I just hope they have a gym I can use a lot as my quirk control grows, since normal equipment likely won't stand up against my quirk. Izuku stated as they started to head inside, and All Might nodded his head a bit as he spoke up. I've already talked to the principal about that, and I'm donating money for a new building that will specialize in quirks like ours to be built. It should be done within a few weeks since quirks will be used to build it up. Until then, the other gyms have equipment that will handle you for a short period of time. All Might stated as they entered the main building and headed towards the principal's office. It's not that 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗃 lacks money or resources, but they aren't UA, where they have so much money that they blow it on massive robots. Instead, the school goes for the more efficient types of training equipment and buildings that can serve many needs instead of just limited needs. Soon, their group arrived at the principal's office and waited outside to be called in, and only had to wait about 5 minutes since they were actually quite early by about an hour, so they were okay with waiting. As they were called in, Izuku saw the principal, who was known as the Red King. "Hello, All Might, and I take it this is your protege and the 9th user of One for All Izuku Midoriya?" asked Makoto Suo, who was the principal of 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗃 203. "Hello, All Might, and I take it this is your protege and the 9th user of One for All Izuku Midoriya?" asked Makoto Suo, who was the principal of 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗃. All Might nodded his head and introduced everyone to the principal. "It's a pleasure to meet you, sir, and thank you for accepting me on such short notice," Izuku stated as he bowed his head, and the principal waved him off. "It's not every day that the symbol of peace comes knocking on my door. I also get to flaunt the fact that Nezu lost you as well, so it works perfectly for me," said the principal while laughing a bit, and All Might rolled his eyes. He really didn't want to get caught up in the pettiness between the two principals. UA has always held out as the so-called #1 school of Japan, when both UA and 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗃 are more or less at the same level. The problem is that UA has had All Might, Endeavor, and other famous pro heroes that graduated from the school. 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗃 has had Hawks graduate a few years ago and was able to break through the ranks as well, which has given them more fame, but it still doesn't compare to All Might's fame that is associated with UA. However, if Izuku graduates from 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗃, then UA's lead will shrink far more, and the two schools will be in open conflict on the title of #1 hero school, instead of UA being thought of as the #1 hero school in Japan. Soon everyone sat down because the principal had questions he wanted to ask. "All Might, you have told me the history of the quirk and all for one. I want to ask, are you 100% sure that the man is dead?" asked Principal Suo. All Might nodded his head and quickly spoke. "I crushed his head, and though I will admit we didn't find his dead body since his men took it, but no one should be able to survive having their head completely crushed, since the brain controls the body, which controls the quirks, which would stop him from regenerating if he had a regeneration quirk," All Might stated, and the principal nodded his head. "The reason I asked is to understand the threat level my school may face with Midoriya being here if that man was still alive and found out about him. However, if he's dead, I will take small countermeasures against his possible remnants that might target Midoriya for revenge if they ever find out. Midoriya, moving forward you should only leave campus with another student if possible, since the more your name gets out there the more likely you are to be targeted," Principal Suo stated, and Izuku nodded his head. All Might promised to inform the principal of anything regarding All for One, and if they ever found anything that countered their belief that the man was dead. Soon they moved on to the topic of Izuku's current progress. "From what I've been told, you got kicked out due to the lack of control during the quirk tests that Eraserhead conducts. Have you been able to make any progress since then?" the principal asked, and everyone smiled at that question, and he had a guess that Midoriya did indeed have progress. "Yes, sir, with the help of Gran Torino, I was able to gain control of my quirk, and now I'm able to use it at a max limit of 5% currently. I am able to hold it activate non-stop for 30 minutes as it stands as well before I get exhausted, but that doesn't including high levels of movement or combat, so I am assuming 15 minutes with that taken into account." Izuku stated, and 𝗵𝗃𝗃 told Izuku to turn his quirk on at 5% without moving, and Izuku did. The principal was impressed that Izuku was able to get the quirk under control so fast. "You really screwed up, didn't you, Eraserhead? You just lost a highly valuable student because you couldn't bother reading his file, most likely before the first day of class," Principal 𝗬𝗃 thought. He was also happy that the staff at the school wouldn't need to spend time helping Izuku figure out control and that Izuku would be able to jump right into lessons now. "Good, I was going to restrict you from lessons until you had control, since I won't condone you breaking your body. However, since you have the control, you will be allowed into all lessons like everyone else. I am warning you now. I will not tolerate you breaking yourself by going over your limits. Pushing your limits is one thing, but going over them to just score a win in a lesson isn't acceptable. It's one thing to push past your limits for the sake of your and others' lives in the field, but not in a classroom lesson. Do I make myself clear?" Principal 𝗬𝗃 asked with a strict tone, and Izuku nodded his head, and 𝗵𝗃𝗃 was happy that the school was going to take a strict approach with her son's recklessness. Soon, the meeting came to an end and the principal had a staff person escort them over towards the dorms. A staff person that the principal had called for lead everyone over towards the dorms that Izuku would be staying at. There was a top floor where the homeroom teacher stays at, which had a few extra rooms as well, which the school uses for storage or emergencies. One of the spare rooms is where 𝗵𝗃𝗃 would be living, since he will spend most of his time with Izuku's class, but mostly Izuku. As such, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 would be living in the freshman dorms on the same floor as the homeroom teacher for 1A of 𝗬𝗵𝗃𝗁 High School. Soon they arrived at the dorms and it was decently made. The staff person explained that the main common room area where everyone gathers is made in a cedar log and stone type build structure, while the upper floors take a more neutral color scheme since they leave it up to the students to decorate their own living areas, while the common room area is made to appeal to the masses. Overall, it was an amazing looking home area and Izuku could see how it would fit a decent number of students in the building since there are 20 students per hero course class 93. Overall, it was an amazing looking home area and Izuku could see how it would fit a decent number of students in the building since there are 20 students per hero course class. Izuku figured that easily 2 classes could fit into the common room space if they needed to. There was a dining room table that fit 10 people under the second floor walkway, while Antower table was off to the side behind an opening near the kitchen. There was also more seating at the kitchen counter area. It was as if the building was duplicated on each side with 2 wings, with the main living area in the middle as it was outwards. After looking around the common room area, they soon went up to the main area where people would sleep and live at. The staff person warned Izuku that the dorms are made to house 2 people each. Each room has its own bedrooms with bathrooms attached that they are meant to clean themselves. They also have their own laundry units in their dorm rooms with a smaller kitchen to cook small quick meals and a smaller living room as well. They also have their own laundry units in their dorm rooms with a smaller kitchen to cook small quick meals and a smaller living room as well. 59 Izuku was told that he would meet his roommate later in the afternoon when they arrive. Overall, the small kitchen is meant to cook meals that you don't want to go to the main common room for. We tend to see the students do dinner together in the common room and they all help cook or take a rotation on days. Then they tend to cook breakfast or small snacks in their dorms. For stocking of food, we have a large fridge and freezer area on the common room floor that you will be showed later on. You just take anything you want from there to your dorm, but don't take more than you will actually use," stated the staff person as she warned that the food supplies are only stocked at the end of each week, so the students are instructed to not waste as best as they can. Overall, Izuku liked the dorm and wondered who his classmate would be. The staff lady pointed towards a phone that connected to the main staff dorm and said that the phone could call outside of the school, but it's mainly meant to call the staff dorms. Don't abuse it. If you are wanting to call outside of the school, I suggest just using your cell phone since most people have one these days. Save the phone for contacting the staff dorm or the main campus building. The phone can also contact the teachers in your own dorm if you can't go upstairs to get them. Again, only call them if it's an emergency and not ask homework questions. Use common sense on why you should or shouldn't call them," stated the staff person, and Izuku nodded his head. The staff lady said she would be down in the common room since more students would be showing up throughout the day. There would be a tour of the entire campus on Monday as the homeroom teachers will show them around campus. Soon, they were left to their own devices and they started to unpack Izuku's stuff. Izuku decided to take the dorm on the left side of the room. As such, they moved all of his boxes that were labeled with his name. He did see boxes that didn't belong to him with the name of 𝗍𝗂𝗧𝗵𝗃 listed on them, and Izuku wondered what his dorm mate would be like. As they work unpacking his things, 𝗍𝗂𝗁 pointed out that he didn't bring his all-might shrine with him, which he blushed at. Kind of strong to sleep with all of that merchandise now that I have the real one as a father in my life, Izuku muttered, and All Might broke out in a burst of laughter at hearing that. Soon they finished setting the room up and it was more or less more normal for what most people would consider. There was indeed some All Might merchandise, but not to the scale of his room back at his mother's place. There was also some merchandise from other heroes as well, but not as much since Izuku was shifting his focus to getting stronger and less fanboying. Soon, they all went down to the common room area since they were done unpacking everything of his. As they made it downstairs, they were greeted with another student and his family in the common room. As they were all talking, Izuku heard the name of the student, which was the name of his new roommate. Izuku decided to get some courage and walked up, which the staff person noticed. Ah, Midoriya, perfect timing. Midoriya, this is Inasa Yarashi, who is your dorm mate for your room. Yarashi, this is Izuku Midoriya, stated the staff person as she introduced Izuku and Inasa to each other. Izuku was caught off guard by Inasa Yarashi, who seemed to be a very energetic person. 7. Hello, Midoriya. I am Yarashi and it's a pleasure to meet you. Yarashi stated as he bowed more than 90 degrees, which confused Izuku. 78. Hello, Midoriya. I am Yarashi and it's a pleasure to meet you. Yarashi stated as he bowed more than 90 degrees, which confused Izuku. Yarashi parents just sighed and apologized for their son since he was an overenergetic child that expresses himself with vigor and is loud a lot of the time. Their son though just turned around to them and said some things about pro-heroes need passion. A burning passion. Izuku soon started laughing a bit and everyone looked at him. Sorry, I am not laughing at you. It's been a while since I've met someone like this that wasn't aggressive towards me. Izuku stated, and this raised some questions in everyone that didn't know about his life. Nice to meet you, Yarashi. I look forward to working with you. Izuku stated, and Yarashi snapped out of his mind since he was wondering what Izuku meant by people being aggressive towards him, but he would figure that out later on. Soon, Yarashi went up to the dorm with his parents and they started to unpack their things. The Midoriyas, All Might, and Gran Torino all went up to Gran Torino's room and started to help him unpack his things as well. After they got done, All Might asked Izuku to speak with him for a second. They sat down on the couch in Gran Torino's room, which he didn't share with others since he was a staff person. Son, I want you to take these. All Might said as he handed Izuku a credit card and several phone numbers and documents. Izuku was confused and so was 𝗍𝗂𝗁, but All Might explained. First, the credit card is for you to use on anything you need to buy. Food, clothing, personal items, you name it, then you can then buy it with a credit card. There is no limit on it either, so have fun, but don't go crazy since you do need to learn to spend money wisely. Before you or your mother argue with it, I'm giving it to you for many reasons. 1. I have a lot of money, and if I don't spend it on you, then who am I going to spend it on since I won't ever have biological children my age? 2. You are also my protege and will inherit everything of mine. My 𝗵𝗃𝗲 didn't really have anything for me to inherit since she didn't go up high in the ranks due to her death being so quick at all for one hand. However, I have a vast fortune and a lot of other things which you will inherit, which includes my agency. All Might stated, and Izuku was in shock. He didn't understand why All Might was giving him all of these things. I see you look confused. It's simple, the moment you took one for all, you were going to inherit everything of mine to start with since I don't have biological children, as I said. As I grew closer to you during our training, I knew I wouldn't ever regret giving you everything I own either, since I know you would manage all the charities I own quite well and not allow them to be corrupt like other charities become after their first owners die and can't manage them anymore. All Might stated, and Izuku nodded his head. 𝗍𝗂𝗁 was still in shock as well. Anyway, The documents are for legal reasons that state you own everything, and they were witnessed by my friend in the police force and Gran Torino as well. The documents have the information for my lawyers and everything as well, but I will also leave a copy of everything with your mother in the event you lose it. I am not giving this to you in the preparation of me dying. No, I am doing it because I want to, and I honestly had no one to give it to before now. Before I met you, it was going to go into a trust to be managed by my detective friend, but he wouldn't enjoy doing all of that while you would likely do so, since a few of the charities are about quirkless people and discrimination, which would be an important topic for you. All Might stated, and Izuku nodded his head as he hugged All Might. Soon they stopped talking about the ill-fated things and moved on to other topics. The phone numbers I gave you are for Gran Torino, the police detective, 𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗵𝗃, Principal Nezu, and my work phone, and you already have my personal number. In the event you ever need one of them, then you have their numbers. David hasn't been told about you yet though, so only contact him after I tell him about you, or he might think you are joking. All Might stated with a laugh, and soon they all moved downstairs and Izuku and Inko cooked up a meal for everyone since they were told to enjoy themselves if they wanted to. Izuku Midoriya went to sleep that Sunday night with anxiety, even though his mother and All Might reassured him that it would be fine. Yeah, the first day of UA was meant to be fine as well, but it went south quite quickly in Izuku's honest opinion now, didn't it? Anyway, the next morning came quickly and Izuku was lucky enough that he was already tired from the day's activities that his body ended up going to sleep even though he knew it was unlikely for him. He woke up and looked at the alarm clock. I have about an hour before classes start. I'm amazed I got about 7 hours of sleep, which surprises me. Izuku thought as he got up and got dressed in the Shiketsu High School uniform. Overall, Izuku was surprised the hat even fit onto his hair without it coming off. Soon he moved into the living room of the dorm and saw his roommate Yurashi making breakfast. Good morning, Yurashi, when did you get up? Izuku asked him, and he looked at the clock. Oh, about 30 minutes ago. I like to be up at least an hour and a half before I have to go anywhere, most of the time if it's possible. I've cooked us some breakfast, and you can also call me 𝗍𝗍 by the way, since we will be spending a large amount of time together. 𝗍𝗍 stated, and Izuku nodded his head and thanked him for the food as he sat down at the counter since there were chairs at it. Thanks, and you can call me Izuku if you want, 𝗍𝗍, Izuku stated, and 𝗍𝗍 nodded his head as he sat down and ate with Izuku. So 𝗍𝗍, what pushed you to come to Shiketsu instead of another hero school? Izuku asked, wanting to know his roommate more. 𝗍𝗍 looked at Izuku and sighed a bit, which confused Izuku. I actually was going to UA on recommendation, but I decided to come here instead. The son of the number 2 hero was going to UA and I didn't like him. He feels like everything is wrong with heroes, and all I saw in his eyes was anger and hatred. It wasn't something I believe heroes should have, and I wanted to come to Shiketsu instead if that was the type of students going to UA. 𝗍𝗍 stated, and Izuku realized that 𝗍𝗍 was somewhat right. UA did accept Bakugo, even though Izuku was sure his entire being is completely opposite of his student file in regards to behavior. I see we might have ended up as classmates at UA for the short time I was a student there, Izuku stated, and 𝗍𝗍 looked confused, and Izuku realized he let the cat out of the bag on the issue. So do you know that UA teachers, or rather a 1A teacher, do a quirk apprehension test on the first day of class at UA? Izuku asked, and 𝗍𝗍 shook his head, not knowing that. Well, they do. The last place individual gets expelled, and sadly I only have had my quirk for 2 months before UA started. I received my quirk late in my life, so the first time I used was during the UA entrance exam. I had planned to gain control of my quirk during school in a controlled environment, but that backfired as I was expelled since the teacher deemed me with zero potential. Ironically, it only took me 3 days to get a grasp on my quirk under a very decent teacher that now teaches here at Shiketsu starting this year. Izuku stated, and 𝗍𝗍 was shocked with what he learned, and he started to put the dots together. So that is what he meant by people being aggressive towards him. 𝗍𝗍 thought, since he knew some of the numbers regarding quirkless people. That means you were quirkless for a decade of your life. That explains your comment yesterday about people being aggressive towards you. First off, you never deserved any of that treatment. Second, it's UA lost if they were too lazy to help teach you control of your quirk. How strong is your quirk? 𝗍𝗍 asked Izuku, and Izuku rubbed his neck in embarrassment. Enough that it broke my legs and arm when I used it the first time. It's been compared to the strength of All Might when I first used it. I can only use 5% right now as I need to put more muscles on my body and let my body adapt to the quirk since everyone else has had 10 years to use their quirks when I've only had a little over 2 months. Izuku said, and 𝗍𝗍 was choking on his water at the information he just learned. Dear God, UA really lost out. 𝗍𝗍 thought based on the information that Izuku provided. Soon they noticed it was time to get to class and they got up and left. Soon, they were both in the classroom and Izuku noticed it looked more or less similar to how UA's classroom looked, which didn't surprise him. Izuku sat down in a seat and 𝗍𝗍 sat behind him and they waited until all of their classmates arrived in the room. There were all different types of people, but soon the teacher arrived and had everyone sit down so he could start. Welcome to your first day at Shiketsu High School. I am your teacher Oshiro Higa, otherwise known as the Underground Pro Hero Greed. My quirk allows me to snatch away energy from my opponents as long as I have a visual line of sight on them. I can increase the amount of energy I take from them if I touch them, but that does require me to get up close and personal, where I prefer to drain them first and then end the fight. My eyes do glow a bit when I activate my quirk. Any questions? No. Good. Stated Higa-sensei. Everyone sweat drop a bit at his quick dismissal of any questions. Soon they were led to an auditorium for their first day speech. The principal made an appearance and he introduced the new teacher, which was 𝗵𝗃. Most of you won't recognize this man, but his hero name is 𝗵𝗃, who used to teach at UA High School for a brief period of time. He's been hired on recently and will have free reign in taking control of anyone training as he sees fit. Don't be surprised if you see one of your fellow classmates taken under his wings, since he prefers one-on-one teaching most of the time and will work as he sees fit. He though will end up spending time with the first years a bit more, since he's already picked a student he's taking under his wing to train for a while. As such, don't be surprised if you first years start seeing him more. Stated the principal as he set the stage for why 𝗵𝗃 would be near Izuku, but 𝗍𝗍 had already met 𝗵𝗃 on the first day and gave Izuku a look that promised questions, which Izuku nodded his head at. Soon, the teacher took them all back to their classroom for introductions. After introductions, we will be doing a tour of the campus. You won't have any training or homework today, but we will start up tomorrow doing it all. Today will be about getting to know everyone and finding your way around campus, since I tend to just text my students where I want you to meet if I change the schedule on a moment's notice sometimes, stated their teacher, and they all nodded their heads. Soon the class started their introductions and it was now Izuku's turn. Izuku went up front and looked at everyone. Hello, my name is Izuku Midoriya and it's nice to meet you all. I will be upfront about a bit about my past. I used to be quirkless until about 2 months ago. I received my quirk late in my life and I've only recently gained control of it. Before Shiketsu High School I was actually at UA, but the teacher I ended up with deemed me with 0 potential last week since I didn't have my quirk under control. I had wanted to wait until I was in a stable environment to get help controlling it, since my quirk is highly destructive of my body and everything around me if I used it, since it wiped out one of the 0 pointers in the UA entrance exam. However, that backfired since the teacher expelled me on the first day, since he deemed me to have 0 potential and said I could never be a hero. However, I have now gained control of my quirk and I can use 5% of it without breaking my body. 𝗵𝗃, which the principal introduced to everyone at the assembly, is the one that helped me train last week after I got expelled from UA, and he was able to help me get control of my quirk within 3 days. As such, I ended up transferring to Shiketsu instead, and the principal was kind enough to accept me since a spot had opened up in this class due to someone's situation changing and them no longer attending. Any questions? Izuku asked and waited for someone to speak up. 𝗍𝗍 raised his hand and Izuku pointed at him. So that is why he was with you when you moved into the dorms? 𝗍𝗍 asked and Izuku nodded his head. Indeed, he stayed at my mother's home with us last week so he could spend enough time to get my quirk under control when he started to train me. He wanted me to have some form of control so I could take part in training with the entire class instead of being held back. Izuku stated, and everyone nodded their heads at Izuku's answer. Some other people raised their hands and Izuku answered their questions. One person asked what was life like without a quirk since the person was interested to know. The teacher tensed a bit and looked at Izuku before speaking. Midoriya, you don't need to answer that. I know the statistics and they aren't pretty. Only talk about it if you are comfortable with it, stated their professor, and everyone looked confused except those that knew the numbers around quirkless people. It's okay, I plan to be a hero and open talk about it a lot in the future when I have enough influence, so talking about it with my classmates would be really the first step towards that to making chance. Izuku stated, and the teacher nodded his head but were still a bit tense. Izuku then looked at everyone and took a deep breath in. My life before I received my quirk was, let's say, painful. I would be constantly attacked and used as a quirk test dummy because people didn't put a value on quirkless people's lives when quirkless people can achieve so many things as well. Fun fact, did you know that 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗂𝐴's daughter is quirkless and she is an up-and-coming inventor on Island? Izuku stated, and everyone shook their heads. Izuku did a lot of research on anyone famous that was quirkless in recent times, and she was one person he knew of that was up and coming. Back to where I was, the police did nothing about the attacks on me and even encouraged it in a way. My teachers in my previous schools would lower my grades because the quirkless child shouldn't be scoring higher than the quirk children. I would be beaten up and have my lunch or items stolen from me all of the time. I was even suicide baited a lot of the time as well because none of the authority figures that had the power to stop it wanted to. They didn't want to risk the futures of the quirk children. Izuku stated as a few tears ran down his face. He found it odd, the more he talked about it the less it hurt him each time he openly talked about it when he thought he would be in so much pain reliving the memories. The room was silent and everyone had eyes of shock at what they learned. Sensei, please tell me the school is going to look into Midoriya's school that can't continue, stated one student in the back, and a few people that had come out of their shock nodded their heads. The teacher was also a bit shocked since this was his first time hearing the life of a quirkless person directly. As he was called out, he looked at the students and nodded his head. Yeah, I will talk to the principal about looking into it. We need to be careful of not tipping them off so they don't get rid of evidence, so it will take time, but we will without a doubt be looking into it, though I feel like your mentor may have already started looking into it, Midoriya. The teacher asked, and Izuku looked at him. I don't know for sure, but knowing him, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. It would be best to have the principal ask before they go jumping in when there might already be a case being made. Izuku stated, and everyone asked him who his mentor was, and Izuku avoided the questions which everyone noticed but let it drop. Soon the introductions came to an end and the teacher took them all around campus for a tour. After the tour around campus was done, Izuku and his classmates all headed back to their dorm, but when they arrived they found 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗂𝐴 standing in the common room waiting for them. They all looked confused, but he spoke up. Hello, I'm sure you all remember me from the assembly. As I've been informed, Izuku told you all about me training him, so I will make it clear. I will end up spending a lot more time with your class and I will help you all during your lessons. However, Izuku Midoriya is my main focus outside of your lessons. With that said, brat, get changed now, it's time to start training. 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗂𝐴 said as he jumped off the ground and blasted into Izuku's stomach, making him drop to his knees. Everyone was shocked and stunned, but Izuku got up and ran up the stairs as 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗂𝐴 chased him and kept trying to hit him. Izuku turned his quirk on and kept dodging. Soon they made it back downstairs and everyone in his class was still standing at the door in silence because they didn't think what they saw just happen. Then they heard Izuku coming back down, and as he landed on the first floor, 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗂𝐴 caught up to him and kicked him in the back, sending him to the ground. Get up and get moving. I am not getting any younger and you are about to learn why your MSTR fears me so much. 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗂𝐴 yelled as he kicked Izuku in his side and sent him out the front door past his classmates. They were all still in shock at what was going on. Soon they saw Izuku power his quirk back up and dash off with 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗂𝐴 right behind him as he kept attacking Izuku. Should we call the staff and ask them if that is okay? Asked one of the students in their class. They all nodded their heads and called the main building staff room since the teachers have all told them that they were normally there until 5 p.m. before they would return to their staff dorms. One student made the call and started talking. Hello, Sensei. This is the 1A dorms and we are wondering if we should be expecting more of 𝗵𝗃 attacking our classmate Izuku Midoriya right when we enter our dorm building moving forward, the student asked and then retold them what they all witness. The student was on hold for a moment before the principal came over the line. The principal had the student put the phone on speaker before he spoke. For what you witness will be normal in regards to Izuku Midoriya's training under 𝗵𝗃. 𝗵𝗃 is a harsh and grueling trainer and I actually pray none of you end up under his private training since he will not hold back during those moments. Anyway, are there any more questions? Asked the principal and everyone said no. As such, the phone call came to an end and they all just stood there dumbfounded. That is an interesting way to end our first day of school, stated one class member and everyone nodded their heads as they all sat down and started to talk amongst themselves while some wondered how Izuku would return to the dorms. Now, with Izuku Midoriya. He was currently running away from 𝗵𝗃 with his quirk activated at 5%. 𝗵𝗃 was chasing him and Izuku honestly didn't know where they were meant to be going. As such, he stopped and dogged a hit from 𝗵𝗃. Sir. Where are we even going? Izuku asked as he took a chance to regulate his breathing better. 𝗵𝗃 looked at him and shrugged. I didn't have an actual spot in mind but let's head into the woods behind the dorms. 𝗵𝗃 stated and Izuku looked so done with 𝗵𝗃 since the dorms were behind them and about 10 minutes away since he ran so far. Better get running, brat. 𝗵𝗃 stated and Izuku gulped as he turned his quirk back on and ran. Soon after some running, they were back in the forest behind the dorms. So what are we working on today, 𝗵𝗃? Izuku asked as he took a drink of water that 𝗵𝗃 threw at him. Izuku noticed they were always meant to come here since 𝗵𝗃 had stuff set up. As such, he made Izuku do all of that running on purpose. 𝗵𝗃 thought about it for a few minutes before looking at Izuku. Turn your quirk on to the max you can go to and tell me what percentage you're at. 𝗵𝗃 stated and Izuku turned it on to 5%. It's still 5%. Izuku asked and 𝗵𝗃 looked him over and shook his head. Raise the percentage as slow as you can until you start feeling pain because from what I can tell your body adjusted already to 5% so we need to fix your new max limit. Stop when it starts to feel like a buzzing sensation under your skin or it starts prickling a bit. 𝗵𝗃 stated and Izuku nodded his head. Izuku closed his eyes for a bit and started to feel the power going up. 5%, 6%, 7%, 8% ow. Izuku thought as he hit 8% and it started to hurt. As such, he started to drop it down to 7% and the intense prickling feeling went away. He then opened his eyes. I am at 7% and the prickling feeling isn't intense enough to stop me from using it. It's like how it was at 5% when I first achieved it. Izuku stated as 𝗵𝗃 looked at him. This kid's pain tolerance must be high to withstand the feeling of being pricked by needles non-stop. 𝗵𝗃 thought as he connected the dots of Izuku's childhood to his higher pain tolerance and hated the people that did it to the kid. Okay kid, each time the feeling of the prickling goes away I want you to tell me about it. Okay. 𝗵𝗃 asked and Izuku nodded his head at that request. Then 𝗵𝗃 then spoke about what they would be working on for the afternoon. We need to find you a combat style or fighting style that fits you. Let me say it right now, you are not All Might so don't even bother copying him with just his punches. You need to make your own DMN style like every user before you. The 7th user had her float quirk with one for all and focused on quick combat and flying combat from above people. You are built for more speed style. So, I want you to look towards using your legs with kicks more than anything. Power up and let's spar and see if you can start finding yourself a combat style. 𝗵𝗃 stated and Izuku nodded his head as he powered the quirk up to 7% and dashed off towards 𝗵𝗃. 𝗵𝗃 easily dodged the attacks and Izuku kept trying to capture him. As the training was going on, Izuku kept thinking of how to adapt his fighting to win. As Izuku was jumping around and trying to land a blow on 𝗵𝗃, he started to analyze how 𝗵𝗃 was moving about. Soon, Izuku moved from just running and jumping to more of a style that mimicked 𝗵𝗃𝗏𝗏's movements a bit more, as Izuku was quickly moving as he jumped between things before he tried to land a hit. They kept this training up for several hours before 𝗵𝗃𝗏𝗏 let Izuku return to the dorms. Good job, brat. You are free to go back to the dorms for the night. I will be planning on how to adapt your training more, but you are starting to get a fighting style going, but don't copy me fully. It's okay to take things from other styles, but don't copy someone's completely since it won't fully work for you. Understood. 𝗵𝗃𝗏𝗏 stated, and Izuku nodded his head as he made his way back towards the dorms. He soon arrived and he was hungry, but as he came into the dorms he saw everyone looking at him. Hi. Izuku asked, and they all got up and asked if he was alright since he looked like he was going through hell, as they all had front row seats to his training since it could be seen from the common room dorms. Izuku rubbed his neck and said that was only light training from 𝗵𝗃𝗏𝗏. It's only going to get worse from here on out for me. I only have 2 months with my quirk while you all have 10 years or so. As such, I need to get as much training in as I can get. Izuku stated, and they all groaned as they felt the phantom pain from just imaging his training that he would be put through. Inesa pulled Izuku and made him sit at the dining table on one side of the common room as another person went and brought him food. Thank you guys, Izuku said, and they said it was fine since they all got to eat together as he was put through hellish training. They also got entertainment out of it even though he was being beaten up by the teacher, which Izuku sweat drop at.